The drizzle came down in gossamer threads, coating the sidewalk in a film that turned the whole neighbourhood into a dark mirror. Maya pulled her hood tighter and watched her breath fog in the October air, each exhale a small ghost that dissolved before it could follow her. Her phone buzzed against her hip, the 4th time in an hour. "You good?" She stopped under the skeletal branches of an oak and typed back with numb fingers. "I'm fine." The lie tasted like copper. She pocketed the phone and kept walking, counting the cracks in the pavement to keep her thoughts from spiralling into the shape they'd taken lately. That specific architecture of panic that built itself in her chest at odd hours. That's when she saw it. A puddle ahead, maybe 10 feet away, unremarkable except for the light inside it. Not reflected light, no street lamp overhead, no headlights from passing cars, but a luminescence that seemed to well up from underneath the asphalt itself. Foxfire blue, the kind of colour that doesn't exist in nature but shows up in dreams and old paintings of saints. It pulsed with a rhythm like breathing, steady and patient, and it cast no glow on the wet pavement around it, didn't touch her sneakers or illuminate her hands when she held them out. The light stayed trapped inside the water, as if the puddle were a window looking down into some phosphorescent basement. Maya stood there for a long moment, rain tapping a Morse code on her hood. Then she stepped around it, giving it a wide berth the way you'd avoid a stranger who was standing too still on an empty platform. The glow flared, just once, a single pulse of brightness like a startled eye opening, and then it settled back to that steady inhale-exhale rhythm, as if it had noticed her, as if it was waiting for her to notice it back. She walked faster. Her grandfather's voice surfaced in her memory, soft and accented, the way it sounded when he told stories after dinner, his hands shaping the air. She must have been 8 or 9, curled on the couch with cocoa going cold in her hands. He'd been talking about the old country, about the lights that appeared in the marshes after dark, blue and green and sometimes pale gold, hovering over water and mud. Will-o'-the-Wisp, he'd called them. Jack-o'-lantern lights. They look like lanterns someone's carrying, leading you somewhere safe, but they lead you into the bog instead. Off the road. Into the deep places where the ground gives way. She remembered asking if they were ghosts. No, Belia. Not ghosts. Truths, maybe. The kind you don't want to look at. They answer untrue words. He'd tapped his temple. Each small lie feeds them a step closer. In the old country, they stayed in the wild places. But here, he gestured around the small kitchen, the linoleum and the humming refrigerator. Here they learned to slip through storm drains. They light the lowest places, gutters, culverts, potholes, anywhere the water pools and waits. How do you make them go? Away, she'd asked. You kneel to the water, he'd said, his face serious in the lamplight, and you say the name you won't say. The true thing, bread and salt help if you have them, and a real message to a real person, not the words you think they want to hear. The words that cost you something. She'd thought it was just a story, the kind of fairy tale that worked better in the old language, that lost its teeth in translation. Her phone buzzed again. Different person this time. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? Maya stopped at the corner and typed, I'm fine, just busy. Another lie, smooth as river stones. She hit send. Ahead, where the street bent into the warren of alleys behind the shuttered downtown, another puddle ignited. Same impossible blue, same inward light. And another beyond it, a constellation leading away from the safe route home, pulling her line of sight down an unfamiliar street lined with blank windows and closed storefronts. She should have turned around, should have gone the long way, up toward the main road where the 7-Eleven sign buzzed and the bus stop offered at least the illusion of witnesses. But she kept walking, following the chain of lights almost without deciding to, the way you follow footprints in snow just to see where they go. The puddles formed a path. Each one bloomed as she approached, as if her proximity completed some circuit. And as she got closer to each pool of water, she started to see things in them. Not reflections of the sky or the buildings, but images that had no business being there. Memories, or pieces of them, fractured and reassembled wrong. In the third puddle she saw a hospital corridor, the green linoleum and fluorescent lights warping in the ripples. She recognized it instantly. The long walk to the waiting room, the smell of disinfectant, the specific quality of silence that only hospitals have, that cotton-muffled quiet that makes every sound sharp. In the fourth, a door slamming. Her mother's door. The wood grain magnified, the brass knob catching light, and if she looked long enough she could almost hear the sound again, that decisive bang followed by the click of a lock. In the fifth puddle, a text thread. Not the current conversation on her phone, but an old one, deleted months ago. The words floating on the water's surface like debris. I can't do this anymore. You know that, right? You know this isn't working. Messages she'd typed and erased, before finally sending a version scrubbed clean of anything that might cause damage. I think we need some space. It's not you. Maya stopped walking. Her reflection stared up from the water, but the mouth moved wrong, shaping words she recognised from darker hours. Search queries she'd typed at 3 a.m. and then deleted from her history. How to know if you're a bad person. How to tell if everyone secretly hates you. Why do I feel nothing anymore? She backed away, her breath coming too fast. This wasn't real. Pareidolia, the brain's desperate pattern-making, seeing faces in clouds and meaning in static. She was tired, stressed. The semester was eating her alive and she hadn't slept properly in weeks. And sometimes when you're that exhausted, the world starts playing tricks. I'm fine, she whispered to no one. The puddle brightened, and from its centre a thread of light lifted, a filament thin as spider silk, blue as a pilot light, rising from the water and stretching toward the next corner, beckoning. The other puddles down the street pulsed in sequence, a runway of cold fire leading deeper into the maze of alleys. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look at it. She could feel the lies stacking up in her pocket. Each I'm fine and don't worry and everything's good. Adding weight, mass, gravity. They pulled like a tide. She followed the lights. The streets bent wrong. Geometry stopped making sense. She was on 3rd Avenue, and then she wasn't. The alley opened onto a service road she'd never seen before, and that led to a loading dock that shouldn't connect to anything but somehow spat her out behind the old cinema, the one that had been closed since before she was born. The puddles multiplied, forming constellations that mapped a route through the city she thought she knew, but clearly didn't. Not the way it was tonight, not with the roads folding into themselves like an origami diagram. Manhole covers exhaled cool breath that smelled of rust and deep earth. Storm grates hummed with a pitch that matched the puddle's glow, a frequency she felt in her molars. The water itself looked wrong, too thick almost, the surface tension strange. Oil rainbows floated over the blue like bruised halos, shifting in patterns that suggested language or warning. In one puddle, she saw herself sitting on the floor of her apartment at 2 a.m, laptop open, the cursor blinking in an empty search bar. The memory felt invasive, private, something no light should have access to. In another, her grandfather's funeral, the reception afterward, someone asking, "How are you holding up?" and her answering, "I'm okay. Really?" While inside, she collapsed like a demolished building, floor after floor going down. The puddles tightened their spacing. What had been 10 feet between each light became 5, then 3. They were stepping her forward, calibrating her path with increasing precision, herding her towards something. Ahead, the alley mouth opened onto darkness that breathed. A storm culvert, the kind that swallowed runoff during heavy rains, a concrete throat that led down into the city's subterranean plumbing. Water murmured inside it with a sound almost like voices, or maybe like one voice split into many frequencies, whispering in a language she almost recognised. She should stop, turn around, go home, lock the door and make tea and pretend this was just the product of stress and sleep deprivation and too many horror movies watched alone. But her legs kept moving, carrying her to the culvert's lip where the shadows breathed that cold exhalation. At the edge, the water collected in a wide basin worn smooth by years of runoff. And this puddle was different from the others, larger, deeper, the light inside it brighter and more complex. The blue had veins in it, a network of luminescence that branched and rebranched like a map or a nervous system. Routes she'd taken and routes she'd avoided, paths chosen and unchosen, all etched in light on the water's surface. She could see the safe way home, the main streets and the lit intersections. She could see the detours she'd been taking, the long walks at odd hours, the routes designed to avoid people she knew. places she used to go. The map showed her all the careful architecture of her avoidance, the geography of her lies made visible. Maya's knees hit the wet concrete before she decided to kneel. The cold soaked through her jeans instantly. Her hands shook, not from the temperature but from something deeper, that tremor that starts in your bones when you're about to do something you can't take back. Her grandfather's voice again. You kneel to the water and you say the name you won't say. She pulled out her phone. The screen was a mosaic of unread messages, all variations on the same question. You okay? You good? Haven't heard from you in a while. Is everything all right? And underneath each one her response is, I'm fine. All good. Just busy. Everything's great. Lies. Every single one. A whole architecture of them built over months, a facade so carefully maintained she'd almost started believing it herself. But the puddles knew. The lights knew. You couldn't lie to something that showed you your own search history, your 3 a.m. browser tabs, the things you almost said and then swallowed back down. Her fingers moved before she could stop them, finding the contact she'd been avoiding. Lauren, her best friend from high school, the one who kept trying to meet up, kept sending cheerful messages that Maya answered with increasing vagueness. She typed slowly, each word a small act of violence against the careful persona she'd built. I'm not fine. I haven't been fine for a long time. I'm scared all the time and I don't know why. I think something's wrong with me. I need help. 5 sentences, 32 words. They sat in the text box like a confession, like evidence. Her thumb hovered over the send button for an eternity that probably lasted 3 seconds. She pressed it. The phone made its small whoosh sound. The message flew into the ether, and Maya felt something in her chest unlock, a pressure valve opening, painful and relieving in equal measure, but the lights hadn't dimmed. If anything, they burned brighter. The name you won't say. She leaned over the basin, close enough that her breath disturbed the surface. Close enough to see her reflection in perfect detail. Dark circles under her eyes, chapped lips, the specific quality of exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together with duct tape and determination. Grief, she said. The word came out raspy, unpracticed. She couldn't remember the last time she'd said it out loud. Felt it, sure, every day, a background radiation that had become so constant she'd learned to move through it the way you move through chronic pain, just part of the baseline now, but saying it, naming it, that was different. Grief, she said again, stronger. I'm grieving. I've been grieving for 2 years and I never stopped and I told everyone I was fine because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to cry at the funeral and then put on a brave face and get back to your life. But I can't. I haven't. I miss him so much it feels like dying. Every day. And I'm so tired of pretending I'm not drowning. The words poured out now, a breach in a dam. I'm angry at him for leaving. I'm angry at myself for being angry at someone who died. I'm scared I'm broken. I'm scared I was always broken and I just didn't notice until... Her voice cracked. She stopped, pulled in a breath that hurt. The basin's light flickered. She remembered the rest of the ritual, bread and salt help. She didn't have bread, but she found, in the pocket of her hoodie, a fast food salt packet from weeks ago, carried through the wash and somehow still intact. Her hands shook as she tore it open. The granules looked silver in the blue light. Maya held the packet over the water and tipped it. Salt crystals fell, each one visible in the glow, tumbling through the air like tiny stars before hitting the surface. They dissolved instantly, and where they touched, the light fractured. The veins of luminescence broke apart, branching and fading like lightning in reverse. The blue dimmed to indigo, indigo to violet, violet to something almost black. And then, starting from the basin and spreading outward, the puddles upstream began to wink out. One by one, in a receding chain, the lights went dark. The puddle showing the hospital corridor faded first, then the slammed door, then the deleted text thread. All the memories draining away, the light pulling back like a tide going out, retreating into the storm drains and the deep pipes and whatever original source fed them. Maya watched the darkness return, and it felt like a gift. The ordinary shadows of an ordinary night in an ordinary city. No maps in the water, no confessions in the ripples, just puddles again, reflecting nothing but the distant sodium lamps and the low clouds. She stood slowly, her knees aching from the concrete. The culvert still murmured with runoff, but it was just water now, just rain finding its way downhill. No voices in it, no breathing. The cold basin lay empty and dark, holding only the pale blur of the real sky, overcast and colourless. Her phone buzzed. Lauren had replied immediately, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you told me. I'm coming over, or you come here, or we meet somewhere. Right now. Seriously, you don't have to do this. Alone. You've never had to do this alone." Maya read the message 3 times. Then she typed, "Can you come over? I don't want to be alone tonight." Another truth. It got easier each time, like working out a muscle that had atrophied. "Already getting my keys," Lauren wrote back. "Be there in 15. Maya started walking. The route back to her apartment revealed itself in straightforward lines. No folding alleys, no impossible connections. 3rd Avenue stayed 3rd Avenue. The loading dock stayed where it belonged. The city snapped back into its proper shape, geometry behaving itself again. She passed a pothole that still held water, and for a second, just a second, she saw a flicker of blue in its depths. But then she whispered, "I'm scared," to no one in particular, just releasing the truth into the air, and the colour faded before it could fully form. Just a trick of reflected neon from a bar sign, or a car's headlights catching the water at an odd angle, or nothing at all. By the time she reached her building, the rain had softened to a mist that hung in the air without falling, and every puddle on the sidewalk reflected only what it should. Streetlights, the dark shapes of buildings, the night sky starting to clear in patches. Lauren was waiting on the stoop, hood up, worry etched in the space between her eyebrows. She stood when she saw Maya, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then Lauren opened her arms and Maya stepped into them and let herself be held, and it was the first true thing she'd allowed herself in months. They went upstairs. Lauren made tea while Maya changed into dry clothes. They sat on the couch with their knees pulled up, mugs warming their hands, and Maya started talking. Not the polished version, not the brave face. The real thing, messy and recursive and full of contradictions. How she missed her grandfather. How she was angry at him for dying before she could ask him so many things. How she'd been so busy taking care of everyone else's feelings that she'd locked her own away somewhere deep and then lost the key. "I kept telling everyone I was fine," she said. "I kept saying it until I almost believed it, but I wasn't. I'm not." "You don't have to be fine," Lauren said. "You just have to be honest." They talked until 3 in the morning, until the words ran dry and gave way to comfortable silence. Lauren stayed over, taking the couch, and for the first time in weeks Maya fell asleep without having to white-knuckle her way through the panic that usually came with darkness and quiet. In the days that followed, she kept talking. To Lauren. To her mum, finally, a phone call that lasted 2 hours and ended with both of them crying, and then laughing, and then crying again. To a grief counsellor whose card Lauren had been carrying in her wallet for a month, waiting for the right time to offer it. Each conversation chipped away at the careful walls she'd built, and it hurt, the way frostbite hurts when circulation returns, but it was the kind of pain that meant healing. She still walked home after dark sometimes, still saw puddles catching the rain, and occasionally, not often, but occasionally, she'd catch a glimpse of blue in the water, a faint glow, a held breath. It happened when she found herself reaching for the old scripts, the automatic "I'm fine" on her lips. But then she'd stop, take a breath, and tell the truth instead. "I'm struggling today. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sad and I don't know why, and that's okay." And the blue would fade. It became a kind of gauge, those momentary glimmers, an early warning system. The lights only appeared when she started lying again, when she tried to rebuild the facade, and all it took to darken them was a spoken truth, even a whispered one, the smallest acknowledgement of what was real. One night in November, she walked home under a clear sky, the first stars emerging through the city's light pollution. A puddle near her building held a perfect reflection of Orion, the hunter's belt crisp and bright in the still water. No blue glow, no breathing light, just stars doing what stars do, existing honestly, light years away and utterly indifferent to human grief or joy, or the small lies people tell to survive. Maya stopped and looked at it for a long moment. That scrap of cosmos caught in a pothole, beautiful for no reason, requiring nothing of her. Then she went inside and called her mom just to talk. No crisis, no news, just the ordinary comfort of a voice she'd known her whole life. After that, the only lights in the water were the ones that belonged to the stars. The counsellor's office smelled like lavender and old books. Maya went every Thursday at 4, slipping out of her last class early to make the appointment. Dr. Chen was maybe 60, with silver hair she wore in a neat bun, and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard everything twice and judged none of it. The first session, Maya had sat rigid on the couch, hands knotted in her lap, wondering what she was supposed to say, how you were supposed to start confessing to a stranger. "Tell me about the lights," Dr. Chen had said, and Maya's head had snapped up. "What?" "The lights, in the water. Your friend mentioned them when she called to help you make the appointment." Dr. Chen's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. "I'd like to hear about them from you." So Maya had told her, haltingly at first, then in a rush. The blue glow, the memories in the puddles, the way lies seemed to feed them. She waited for Dr. Chen to suggest medication adjustments or sleep studies, or to gently imply that stress and grief could make people see things that weren't there. Instead, Dr. Chen had nodded and made a note. "Metaphor or not," she'd said, "your mind found a way to show you what you needed to see, that you were losing yourself in the performance of being okay. Does it matter if the lights were real?" Maya had thought about that for a long time. "No," she'd finally said. "I guess it doesn't." But alone, late at night, she knew they had been real, still were real, in the way that certain truths are real even when you can't prove them. The city held them, waiting in low places, ready to illuminate the specific geography of a person's unspoken pain. She started noticing other things, small details that suggested she wasn't the only one who'd seen the lights, wasn't the first person to follow them into confession. There was graffiti on a storm drain near campus, "Speak True" in silver paint, the letters precise and deliberate, a tiny altar at the entrance to a culvert under the highway, a wet bundle of sage, a pile of salt still visible beneath days of rain, a laminated photo of a young woman smiling, someone's offering, someone else's truth spoken to water. In December, during a late study session at the library, Maya overheard 2 students talking in hushed voices near the stacks. "Saw them on Maple Street, right in front of Rossi's. I thought I was losing it." "What did you do?" A pause. Then, "I texted my dad, told him I wasn't coming home for Christmas because I couldn't pretend anymore. Told him I've known since I was 12 and I'm not trying to fix it or change it, and he could either accept that or not, but I was done lying." A shaky laugh. "The lights went out after that. Just gone. Like they were never there." Maya had gripped her textbook harder, the words blurring on the page. She wasn't alone in this. The city was full of people carrying careful lies, and the lights found all of them eventually, patient as water wearing down stone. Her mother called one evening while Maya was cooking dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and jarred sauce. But the act of feeding herself felt like progress. "I saw something strange tonight," her mother said without preamble. "On my walk. There was a puddle outside the pharmacy and it was glowing. Blue. Like those light sticks from when you were little." Maya's hand froze on the wooden spoon. "What did you do?" "I stood there for 5 minutes feeling like an idiot," her mother said. "And then I thought about what you said. About how you've been struggling. How I kept asking if you were okay and you kept lying and I kept pretending to believe you because it was easier." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've been doing the same thing. Telling everyone I'm fine. That I'm handling it. But I'm not handling it, Maya. I miss him so much. Your grandfather. He was my dad and I never got to... We fought before he died. Did you know that? Something stupid about me working too much, not visiting enough, and I never apologized." "Mom," Maya said softly. "The light got brighter when I started walking away, so I stopped. And I called your Aunt Rita, and I told her everything I've been holding in for 2 years. And the light..." She laughed, a sound caught between tears and relief. "It just faded, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. Is that crazy? Am I crazy?" "No," Maya said. "You're not crazy." They talked for an hour, sharing stories about her grandfather, memories Maya had thought were hers alone. How he'd hum while he cooked, the way he'd mispronounce certain English words and refuse to be corrected, his habit of saving twist ties and rubber bands in a drawer that eventually couldn't close, all the small textures of a person that death tried to flatten into simple grief. When they finally hung up, Maya felt lighter and heavier at once, the particular weight of shared sadness which somehow hurt less than carrying it alone. Winter settled over the city in shades of grey. The puddles froze, then thawed, then froze again. Maya finished her semester, aced her finals for the first time in a year. Not because she'd suddenly become smarter or less anxious, but because she'd stopped pouring all her energy into maintaining a facade. There was more room now for actual living. She started meeting Lauren for breakfast on Saturdays, a ritual they'd abandoned sometime after the funeral. They'd sit in the corner booth at the diner on 5th, working through plates of eggs and hash browns while rain or sleet pattered against the windows. They talked about real things, not just surface cheerfulness, but the texture of their actual lives. Lauren was struggling in her relationship. Maya was thinking about changing her major. Lauren's mum was sick. Maya was worried about money. None of it was easy, but it was honest, and there was relief in that. One Saturday, Lauren said, "I saw them too, you know, the lights." Maya looked up from her coffee. "When?" "Last month, after that fight with Josh. He wanted to know where things were going, and I gave him the whole, 'I need space to figure things out' speech, which was just a nice way of saying I want to break up, but I'm too scared to do it cleanly." Lauren traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass. "I walked home, and there they were, a whole trail of them, leading down toward the industrial park. I followed them to this drainage ditch behind the old factory, and there was this massive puddle, and I could see—" She stopped, her voice catching. "I could see all the relationships I'd ruined by doing exactly this. Being too scared to be honest. Letting things drag on until they imploded. What did you do?" "I called Josh, told him the truth, that I cared about him but I didn't love him, not the way he deserved, and I was sorry for stringing him along because I was too chicken shit to be alone." She smiled sadly. He was hurt, really hurt, but he also thanked me for finally being straight with him, and the lights went out. Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand. They sat like that for a moment, two people who'd learned the same lesson in the same strange way, bound by something they couldn't fully explain and didn't need to. She started keeping a journal, per Dr. Chen's suggestion. Nothing elaborate, just a composition notebook from the drugstore where she wrote down the things that were true, even the ugly ones. "I'm jealous of people whose grandparents are still alive. I resent how easy everyone else makes it look. Sometimes I feel nothing, and that scares me more than feeling too much." Pages and pages of sentences she'd never say out loud, but writing them down felt like diffusing small bombs, rendering them less dangerous. January brought a cold snap that froze the city solid. The puddles turned to ice, cloudy and opaque. Maya wondered if the lights went dormant in winter, sleeping under the freeze until spring thawed them back to wakefulness. But then she saw one. Just a flicker, a glow beneath a sheet of ice on the corner of Grant and 12th, and realised they were still there, still waiting, just harder to reach. She started paying attention to the people around her in a way she hadn't before. The forced smiles in the grocery store checkout line, the careful "I'm goods" in response to "how are yous" that clearly weren't invitations for honesty, everyone performing wellness, herself included, though she was trying to drop the act more often now. There was a guy in her poetry class, Marcus, who always seemed on the verge of saying something in workshop but never did. He'd start to raise his hand, then lower it, start to speak, then shake his head and look down. Maya recognised the gesture, the swallowing of true things, the careful self-censorship. After class one day, she caught up with him in the hallway. "Your poems are good," she said. "You should share them." He gave her a tight smile. "They're too personal. That's what makes them good." He studied her for a moment, and something in his expression suggested he was weighing whether to trust her. "You ever feel like if you started being honest, really honest, everything would fall apart? Like the only thing holding your life together is the fact that nobody knows what you're actually thinking?" Maya thought about blue lights and storm drains and kneeling in the rain. "Yeah," she said, "I have. But I think maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the lies are what's actually making everything fall apart, just really slowly, so you don't notice until you're already broken." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "There's this puddle outside my apartment. It's been glowing for 3 weeks. Blue, like a black light. I keep walking past it and it keeps getting brighter." "So stop walking past it," Maya said. "Kneel down. Tell it the truth." What if the truth is terrible? Then it's terrible, but at least it's yours. She hitched her backpack higher on her shoulder. The lights don't go away because you ignore them. They just get harder to avoid. She didn't see him for a week. When he finally came back to class, he looked exhausted, but somehow more solid, more present. He raised his hand during workshop and read a poem about his brother's overdose, about guilt and survival, and the impossible math of who gets to keep living. His voice shook, but he didn't stop, and when he finished, there was the kind of silence that meant something had shifted in the room. After class, he caught her eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She nodded. No lights necessary for that exchange, just the simple transaction of one person helping another find their way back from the edge. February arrived with a thaw. The ice melted and the puddles returned, ordinary and lightless unless someone nearby was folding themselves into careful lies. Maya found she could almost sense them now, the way you sense weather changing before the first raindrops fall. A prickle at the back of her neck, a coolness in the air that had nothing to do with temperature. She'd look down, and there would be a puddle she hadn't noticed before, beginning its slow glow. But she had tools now, truths to speak, names to say out loud. The light still appeared sometimes. She wasn't cured, wasn't fixed. Grief didn't work that way, but they didn't trap her anymore. They were warnings instead of snares, gentle reminders that she was slipping back into old patterns, that the performance was starting to eclipse the person. She went home for spring break, the first time she'd been back to her grandfather's house since the funeral. Her mother had kept it exactly as it was, which felt both comforting and wrong, like a museum of a life rather than a life itself. They spent 3 days sorting through his things, not throwing them away, just organising, making sense of the accumulated decades. They found letters he'd written to her grandmother, who died when Maya's mother was young. They found photos from the old country, people whose names were lost but whose faces held echoes of Maya's own. They found a journal, half in English and half in his native language, full of recipes and observations, and one entry, near the end, that made Maya's mother cry, "I'm proud of my girls. Both of them. I hope they know. I should tell them more. Tomorrow I will tell them." But tomorrow had never come, the way it often doesn't. They sat together on the back porch, watching evening settle over the garden her grandfather had tended for 30 years. "There's a puddle," her mother said quietly, pointing to a low spot near the fence where water had collected. "It's starting to glow." Maya could see it, that telltale blue, soft as pilot light. "What do you need to say?" Her mother was quiet for a long time. Then, "That I'm angry, that it's not fair, that I wanted more time and I didn't get it, and I hate that I didn't tell him I loved him the last time I saw him, because I was annoyed about something that doesn't even matter now," she wiped her eyes. "And that I'm scared I'm turning into him, putting things off, assuming there will always be another chance to say what matters." "You're not putting it off right now," Maya said. Her mother looked at her, then stood and walked to the puddle. She knelt in the wet grass, right there in her good jeans, and she said it all out loud. The anger, the regret, the love that had nowhere to go now except into the air. Maya watched the light fade, watched the ordinary darkness return, and felt something in her own chest ease. That night, lying in her childhood bed, Maya thought about her grandfather's story, about will-o'-the-wisps leading people off safe roads into bogs and truth. And she realised he'd been wrong about one thing. They didn't lead you away from safety. They led you away from the lie of safety, the false comfort of never saying what hurt. The bog was just honesty. The deep place where ground gives way was just the collapse of careful pretense. And maybe that wasn't death. Maybe it was just a different kind of living, messier, harder, but real. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, started writing down what she'd learned, the rules the lights had taught her. Say the true thing, even when it costs you. Name what hurts. Feed honesty instead of fear. The water remembers every lie, but it forgives every truth. Outside, rain began again. That soft spring rain that brought everything back to life. And somewhere in the city, she knew, puddles were forming in low places, waiting for the next person who needed them. The lights would bloom for someone else tonight, tomorrow, always. Because there would always be people carrying untrue words, building careful facades, performing wellness while drowning underneath. But there would also always be people who knelt, who spoke the names they'd been avoiding, who chose the hard truth over the easy lie. Maya added one more line to her notes. The lights don't punish, they witness. And sometimes being witnessed is the only way to find your way home. She closed her phone and listened to the rain, and she slept better than she had in years. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. The wind doesn't howl, it seethes, a steady hiss that wraps the student apartment block in white static. Inside Unit 3B, Wren sits at a desk cobbled from milk crates and plywood, hunched under the cone of a brass study lamp. The baseboard heater ticks, metal expanding, contracting, a metronome of false warmth. Outside, the blizzard has erased the parking lot, the road, the horizon. Inside, the air smells of instant ramen and the faint chemical tang of textbook glue. Wren's phone lights up. The text is from Sam. "You good?" Wren types back without thinking. "Yes." The moment they hit send, frost blooms across the inside of the window. Not a film, not condensation. Frost, hard and white and sudden, spreading in jagged ferns from the lower left corner, racing up the pane in crystalline fingers. Wren blinks. The heating unit is on. The room is sealed. The frost shouldn't be there at all, and it especially shouldn't be on the inside. They exhale, and the breath hangs visible in the lamplight. A small cloud that drifts toward the window and settles against the glass. It doesn't fade. Instead, it spreads, widening into an oval print, as if a palm has pressed from within the pane itself. Wren watches the shape linger, then widen further, the edges sharpening into 5 distinct marks. Fingers. The room temperature drops, not a degree or two, something sharper, immediate, like stepping from a heated car into January air. Wren tugs their hoodie tighter. On the floorboards near the door, a thin line of snow, loose, granular, shivers forward an inch, though the threshold is sealed and the draft guard is still in place. Wren's chest tightens. They stand, cross to the window and press a hand to the glass. The cold bites back, deep and bone-dry. When they pull their fingers away, the frost underneath has darkened where their warmth touched it, and the handprint from before has stretched, each finger now longer, curling slightly inward like a beckoning. Wren steps back. The heater ticks. The wind hisses. Their phone buzzes again. "Let me know if you need anything." And Wren stares at the screen, thumb hovering. They could type the truth. They could say, "Actually, no, I'm not good. I haven't slept in 3 days. I can't stop thinking about the funeral, about the empty chair at dinner, about how everyone keeps texting to check in but no one actually stays." But instead they lock the phone and set it face down on the desk. The frost creeps another inch up the pane. Wren's grandmother used to tell stories in the winter, back when winters meant wood stoves and thick socks, and the kind of snow that fell soft instead of sharp. She would sit in the kitchen with her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, steam curling past her face, and she would talk about the mountains where she grew up, about storms that lasted weeks, about the figures people saw moving through the white. "Yuki Onna," she'd say, her voice low and steady. "The snow woman. She travels in the storms looking for the ones who are cold inside. Not cold from weather. Cold from the things they won't say. She comes in through breath, not doorways. You invite her when you lie. When you say you're fine and your hands are shaking. When you swear you're warm and your lungs ache." Wren had asked once, maybe 10 years old, bundled in flannel. "How do you make her leave?" Grandmother had smiled, sad and small. "You speak a warm truth onto glass or water. You let the heat out. If you keep denying, she keeps taking until you sleep like ice. But if you give her one real thing, one hurt you've been holding, she lets the house go." Wren hadn't thought about that story in years. Not until now, standing in a room that's too cold, staring at frost that shouldn't exist, remembering the weight in their chest that's been there since the funeral, since the last voicemail they never returned, since the moment they started answering every worried text with, "I'm okay." The phone buzzes. Another friend. Checking in. "How are you holding up?" Wren types, "I'm fine." The frost surges. It races across the window in a single breath, filling the pane from edge to edge, thick and white and intricate. The patterns aren't random. They're structured, deliberate, fern-like ribs branching into smaller veins, curving and splitting like frozen capillaries. And among the ferns, scattered across the glass, are more breath prints. Dozens of them. Ovals that shift as Wren stares. their edges reshaping, tightening, becoming something else. Fingertips. No. Fingerprints. Whorls and ridges pressed into the frost from the inside, as if a hand has dragged slowly down the pane, leaving trails. The heater hums louder, working harder, but the air only grows sharper. Wren can see their breath now with every exhale, each cloud drifting toward the window and adding to the accumulation. The frost patterns begin to bend, to coalesce, and Wren realizes with a cold jolt that they're forming a shape, a face, pale and partial, sketched in ice. The curve of a cheek, the hollow of a mouth, 2 closed eyes beneath a smooth brow. Wren reaches out, palm hovering an inch from the glass. This isn't real? The frost doesn't answer, but when Wren finally touches the pane, pressing their whole hand flat against the cold, the chill bites so deep it burns. They yank their hand back, gasping, and when they look again, the frost beneath their touch has darkened, melted slightly, and the face in the glass has shifted. The closed eyes are closer now, positioned exactly where Wren's hand had been, as if the figure inside had leaned forward to meet them. The power flickers. The lamp dims, browns, steadies. The wind outside intensifies, no longer a hiss but a low, vibrating drone. Wren backs toward the bed, pulls the blanket around their shoulders and sits. The silence deepens. No more texts, no more ticking heater. It's still running, but the sound has been swallowed by something heavier, something that presses against the walls and makes the air feel dense. Only the wind remains, and the thud of Wren's heart, quick and uneven, louder than it should be. Midnight arrives without ceremony. Wren hasn't moved from the bed. The lamp is still on, but its light feels thin, insufficient, barely reaching the corners of the room. The window is a solid panel of white now, frost so thick it looks like snow packed against the glass. The face is still there, clearer now, more defined. Wren can see the line of the jaw, the slope of the nose, the faint parting of lips. And then the eyes open, not with movement, no blink, no flutter. One moment they're closed, the next they're open, wide and pale and empty, 2 circles of void in the frost that seem to see without pupils, without reflection. Wren's breath catches. The face doesn't move, but something shifts in the room, a settling, a presence, as if the air itself has leaned closer. Then the tapping begins. Tick, soft, precise, a fingernail on glass. Tick. It matches the rhythm of Wren's heartbeat. Exactly. When their pulse skips, the tapping skips. When they hold their breath and their heart slows, the tapping slows. Wren's chest tightens with panic and the tapping accelerates. Tick, tick, tick. Faster, sharper, until they force themselves to breathe slowly, deeply, and the rhythm eases back to a steady tick. Tick, tick. Hoarfrost begins to creep down from the top of the window, not spreading across, down, like hair falling, like white threads unspooling along the mullions over the sill onto the wall. The lamp cord frosts over, ice crystallizing in spirals up the rubber casing. The bulb flickers. The light inside it dims to a pale yellow, throwing long shadows that twist and shiver. At the base of the door, where the draft guard should hold, a thin drift of snow licks inward. It doesn't blow, it crawls, seeding across the floorboards in a slow, deliberate line heading toward the bed. Wren pulls their knees up, tucking their feet under the blanket. The snow reaches the desk leg, curls around it, and continues. The room exhales. Wren can see it. A cloud of white mist rising from the floor, from the walls, from the frost-covered window, all of it converging in the centre of the room, hovering, thickening. The temperature is below freezing now. Wren's fingers are numb even inside the blanket. Their ears ache. Their lips feel cracked and stiff. And still, the face in the window watches, eyes open, expression neutral, patient. Wren's phone buzzes. They don't reach for it. The screen lights up on the desk, casting a small blue glow. Another text. Hey, just want to make sure you're okay. Wren's throat tightens. They want to say yes. They want to swipe the phone open and type I'm okay, because that's what they've been saying for weeks, because that's easier than explaining the wait, the silence, the way they can't sleep without seeing the hospital room, the way every kind word feels like pressure, like expectation, like a debt they can't repay. I'm okay, Wren whispers aloud, barely a breath. The temperature drops again, instantly. The frost face in the window smiles. No teeth, just the faint curve of lips pulling upward. Too wide, too smooth, inhuman. The tapping stops. Instead, a new sound. A soft creak as the frost thickens further, pressing outward against the glass, or inward toward the room. A white handprint appears on the inside sill. Palm down, fingers spread. Not a print left by a hand, but a hand of frost. 3-dimensional, sculpted from ice that gleams in the dim lamplight. It rests there, motionless, as if waiting. Wren's breath comes fast and shallow. The snow on the floor reaches the edge of the bed. A fine dusting spills onto the blanket, cold and dry, and Wren jerks back, pressing against the headboard. The lamp flickers once more, and for a moment the room plunges into darkness. Just a second, maybe 2, but in that span Wren hears it. A voice, soft and distant, like wind-shaping words. "Why do you lie?" The light comes back. The room is the same. But the frost face has moved, is no longer centred in the window. It's lower now, closer to the sill, as if the figure has knelt to bring its eyes level with the handprint, with the desk, with Wren. Wren's pulse hammers. They're shaking. Not from cold, though that's part of it, but from something deeper, something that's been building since the first text, since the first "I'm fine," since they stood at the funeral and nodded when people said time will heal, and they wouldn't want you to suffer and didn't say what they were really thinking. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to keep going when they're not here. The legend, the story. Grandmother's voice in the kitchen. She comes in through breath. You invite her when you lie. Wren's hands are shaking too hard to hold the phone. They set it down, push off the blanket and stand. The cold is vicious now, biting through their hoodie, their jeans, their skin. The snow on the floor crunches underfoot. The frost face watches. Wren crosses to the desk. The lamp cord is rigid with the ice. They unplug it carefully. The metal prongs crack free from the outlet, trailing frost. And the room dims further, but there's still enough light from the window, from the white glow of the storm outside and the luminous frost within. Wren turns on the electric kettle, thankfully still working, still warm from the last cup of tea they made hours ago. The water heats slowly, bubbling softly, steam beginning to rise. Wren fills a mug, wraps both hands around it, and the warmth is startling, almost painful against their frozen fingers. They carry the mug to the window. The frost face is close now, so close the features are sharp. The arch of brows, the line of lashes, the faint texture of skin rendered in ice. The eyes are still open, still watching. The handprint on the sill hasn't moved. Wren lifts the mug and breathes onto the glass. The steam clouds the frost in a small circle, melting it, clearing a patch no bigger than a fist. Inside that patch Wren can see through, just barely, to the storm outside, the whiteout, the endless wind. "I'm not okay," Wren says. Their voice is hoarse, barely audible over the wind, but the frost hears. The tapping starts again. Tick. But it's offbeat now, out of sync with Wren's pulse, slower, hesitant. "I'm not okay," Wren repeats louder. "I'm not fine. I haven't been fine since they died, since I got the call, since I stood in that hospital and they asked if I wanted to see the body and I said no because I couldn't, because I was afraid and I've been afraid every day since. I'm afraid I'm forgetting them. I'm afraid everyone thinks I should be over it. I'm afraid I'm never going to stop feeling like this." The steam from the mug rises, fogging the window further. Wren keeps going. "I keep saying I'm fine because it's easier, because no one wants to hear the truth, because the truth is ugly and heavy and I don't want to be a burden. But I'm so tired. I'm so tired of holding this." The patch of clear glass grows. The frost face twitches, recoils, not pulling away but shrinking, the features losing definition, the eyes narrowing, the mouth softening. The handprint on the sill begins to melt, fingers dissolving into rivulets of water that bead and slide. Wren presses the mug against the frost face, right where the cheek would be. The warmth transfers, ice cracks, water runs. "I miss them," Wren whispers. "I miss them so much it hurts, and I need help. I can't do this alone." The frost sighs, a sound like wind through bare branches, soft and mournful. The face unthreads. The eyes fade first, then the nose, the mouth, the cheeks, all of it collapsing into ordinary fern lines, delicate and fragile. The lines weep, turning to droplets that slide down the pane. slow and heavy, leaving trails. The temperature in the room shifts. Not warm, not yet, but less cold. The heater clicks on properly, humming with purpose. The snow on the floor softens, edges melting into damp patches. The frost on the lamp cord cracks and falls away in brittle shards. Wren sets the mug down and picks up their phone. Their hands are still shaking, but they manage. They open the message thread with Sam. "Actually, no. I'm not good. Can we talk?" They send a second text to another friend. "I need help. Can you recommend a counsellor?" The replies come quickly. "Of course. I'm here. Call me whenever." And Wren exhales, long and slow, and for the first time in weeks the breath doesn't hurt. They fill a bowl with warm water, add a pinch of salt from the kitchen shelf and carry it to the windowsill. The frost is mostly gone now, reduced to scattered patches and fading ferns. Wren sets the bowl down gently, a promise, an offering. The wind relents, not gone, still present, still strong, but it shifts from a seething hiss to a steady hush, white noise instead of pressure. The whiteout outside remains, but it feels distant now, separate, no longer, pressing against the glass as if trying to get in. Wren sits back on the bed, pulls the blanket around their shoulders and watches the window. A film of rime forms along the top edge, thin and delicate, then fades. It tries again, thickens slightly, then melts. The cycle repeats, frost, melt, frost, melt. But it never takes hold, never spreads. The room holds its temperature. The lamp, now plugged back in and free of ice, glows steady and warm. The snow on the floor is just water now, small puddles that Wren will mop up in the morning. Later, when the storm surges again, because storms always do, the window fogs, but only when Wren speaks aloud. Only when they tell the truth, when they say "I'm struggling today" or "I'm scared" or "I need someone to listen." When they do, the condensation blooms soft and harmless, a natural fog that fades when the words are done. But if Wren slips, if they text "I'm fine" without meaning it, if they swallow the hurt and force a smile they don't feel, a single white lash appears on the glass, thin, precise, a warning, a reminder. It fades quickly, doesn't spread, but it's enough. Wren sees it and stops, takes a breath, and tries again. By dawn the storm has passed. The sky is pale grey, the kind of grey that promises more snow but offers a reprieve, a moment to breathe. Wren stands at the window, mug of tea in hand, and looks at the glass. The frost is gone. The only marks are melt tracks, thin trails running down the pane like the path of tears or the path of someone walking away. Wren presses their palm to the glass. It's cold, but only the cold of winter, of weather, of a window doing its job. No bite, no burn. And in the centre of the pane, where the frost face had been, there's a small circle of clarity. No fog, no ice, just clean glass. As if a warm breath had touched it and stayed, a permanent thaw, a place where the truth had been spoken and the cold couldn't reach. Outside, the snow is deep and untouched. Wren can't see footprints, but they imagine them anyway. The shape of a woman stepping back into the storm, pale hair streaming, taking the cold with her, leaving only warmth where it was earned. The bowl of salted water still sits on the sill, undisturbed. Wren leaves it there. The tea in Wren's hands has gone lukewarm, but they keep holding it, keep standing at the window watching the grey dawn lighten by imperceptible degrees. The apartment building is silent, too early for footsteps in the hallway, for doors opening, for the muffled sounds of other lives beginning their days. Just Wren and the aftermath, the evidence of a night that feels both impossible and undeniable, the damp patches on the floorboards, the water bowl on the sill, the clear circle in the centre of the glass that refuses to fog no matter how close they breathe. Their phone buzzes. Sam responding to the late-night text, "I'm awake. Want to call now or later? Either way, I'm here." Wren's thumb hovers over the keyboard. The old instinct rises. Later is fine, don't worry about me. But they catch it, feel the lie forming and glance at the window. Nothing, no frost. But they remember the white lash, the warning, and they type instead, "Now would be good. I don't want to be alone with this right now." The call comes through within seconds. Sam's voice is rough with sleep but warm, immediate. Hey, talk to me. And Wren does. Haltingly at first, words catching in their throat, but then faster, easier, like a dam with a crack that finally splits open. They talk about the funeral, about the week before when they knew it was coming, but couldn't make themselves visit the hospital, about the voicemail they never returned because they thought there would be more time. They talk about the guilt, the way it sits in their chest like a stone, the way every condolence felt like an accusation. You should have been there. You should have called. You should have known. Sam listens, doesn't interrupt, doesn't offer platitudes or solutions, just listens, and when Wren finally runs out of words, says quietly, "That sounds really fucking hard." Wren laughs, a small broken sound. "Yeah. You know it's not your fault, right?" "I know that in my head," Wren says, "but the rest of me doesn't believe it yet." "That's okay. You don't have to believe it right now. You just have to keep saying it out loud until it starts to feel true." They talk for another 20 minutes. Sam tells Wren about a therapist they saw last year, after their own breakup, someone who specialised in grief and didn't try to rush the process. Wren writes down the name, the phone number, promises to call when the office opens. When they hang up, the apartment feels less empty, not full, but less like a trap. Wren sets the phone down and looks at the window again. The clear circle is still there, unmarred, a small proof that honesty holds. They think about grandmother, about the kitchen table and the stories, and wonder if she knew. If she'd seen the Yuki-onna herself, or if she'd just understood the way cold works, the way it finds the cracks, the places where warmth is denied, and seeps in until there's nothing left but ice. The sun breaks through the cloud cover for a moment, a single shaft of pale light that catches the melt tracks on the glass and makes them glow. Wren watches the lights slide across the room, illuminating dust motes and the water bowl and the still damp floorboards, and feels something shift. Not relief, not yet, but possibility. The sense that maybe there's a way through this that doesn't require freezing. The next day, Wren goes to class. It's the first time in a week they've left the apartment for something other than food or laundry. The campus is thick with snow, paths carved narrow and treacherous, students hunched against the wind. Wren keeps their hood up, their hands shoved deep in their pockets, and tries to ignore the tightness in their chest that comes from being around people, from the risk of small talk, from the possibility that someone will ask, "How are you?" and expect a simple answer. It happens in the hallway outside the lecture hall. A classmate, Maya, someone Wren has worked on group projects with but doesn't know well, stops and smiles. "Hey, haven't seen you in a while. Everything okay?" Wren's mouth opens. The script is ready. "Yeah, just had a cold. I'm good now." But they feel it, the weight of the lie forming, and they remember the window, the frost, the warning. They take a breath. "Honestly? Not really. I've been dealing with some personal stuff. It's been hard." Maya's smile softens, loses its performative edge. "I'm sorry. That sucks." She hesitates, then adds, "If you need notes or anything from the classes you missed, I can send them over. That would actually help a lot, thank you." It's a small exchange, barely a minute, but when Wren walks into the lecture hall they feel lighter. Not because the grief is gone, it's still there, still heavy, but because they didn't add the weight of pretending on top of it. They sit in the back row, pull out their laptop, and half listen to the professor's drone about supply chains and market equilibrium. Their mind drifts, but not into the usual spiral. Instead, they think about grandmother, about the way she used to hum while she cooked. The melody always just slightly off-key, and the memory doesn't hurt the way it usually does. It aches, but it's a clean ache, like a bruise that's healing. After class, Wren stops by the student health centre. The waiting room is overheated and smells like antiseptic and old magazines. They fill out the intake form, name, date of birth, reason for visit, and when they get to the line that asks what brings you in today, they write, "Grief counselling. I need help processing a recent loss." The counsellor they're assigned is a woman in her 50s with grey-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses, someone who introduces herself as Dr. Melinda Zhao and gestures to a chair that's worn but comfortable. "Tell me what's going on," she says, and Wren does. They talk for 50 minutes, and Dr. Zhao doesn't try to fix anything. She just listens, asks careful questions, and when the session ends, she schedules Wren for weekly appointments, and hands them a photocopied list of grounding techniques. Grief is not linear, she says as Wren is leaving. Some days will be harder than others. That's normal. The goal isn't to stop feeling it. It's to learn how to carry it without letting it consume you. Wren nods, folds the paper and tucks it into their coat pocket. On the walk back to the apartment, the wind picks up, sharp and cold, and for a moment Wren tenses, waiting for the seething hiss, for the pressure of the storm, but it's just wind, just weather. The cold bites, but it doesn't reach inside. That night Wren texts 3 people. Sam to say thank you, Maya to accept the offer of notes, and their mother, who they haven't spoken to in 2 weeks, because every conversation has felt like an obligation, a performance of I'm okay that left them exhausted. The text is short. Hey, I've been struggling. Can we talk sometime this week? The reply comes an hour later. Of course, honey. I've been worried. How about tomorrow evening? Wren agrees, and when they set the phone down they notice the window. It's dark outside, the storm having returned with nightfall, and the glass is fogged with condensation, but only around the edges, only where their breath has touched it naturally. The centre remains clear, the small circle still visible, a zone where the cold can't reach. They fill the water bowl again, add a little salt, and place it on the sill. The gesture feels less like an offering now and more like a ritual, a reminder. A way of saying I'm keeping my promise, I'm not going back. The days that follow are not easy. Wren learns quickly that honesty doesn't make the grief lighter. It just makes it more manageable. There are still mornings when they wake up and the weight is unbearable, when the thought of getting out of bed feels impossible. But on those mornings they text Sam or Dr. Zhao or their mother and say I'm having a hard time today, and somehow that makes it possible to stand up, to brush their teeth, to make tea and sit at the desk and try. The window becomes a barometer. When Wren slips, when they respond to a friend's concern with I'm fine out of habit, when they minimise their pain to avoid burdening someone, the white lash appears. Just one. Thin and precise. A delicate line of frost on the inside of the glass. It never spreads, never grows, but it's there long enough for Wren to see it, to catch themselves, to try again. And when they do, when they speak the truth, even if it's messy or uncomfortable, the lash fades, and the clear circle in the centre of the pane seems to grow, just a little, as if warmth is slowly reclaiming the glass. Winter deepens. The storms come and go, some fierce and blinding, others soft and steady. Wren's apartment stays warm. The frost never returns in force, but sometimes, late at night when the wind is particularly strong, Wren catches a glimpse of something in the window. Not a face, exactly, but a suggestion of one, a shadow in the frost patterns that bloom and fade along the edges of the glass. It doesn't frighten them anymore. It feels more like a presence, a witness, something that remembers and watches and waits to see if Wren will keep their word. One evening, 3 weeks after the first night, Wren is sitting at the desk working on an essay when their mother calls. They've been talking regularly now, and the conversations are different, less performative, more real. Tonight, though, their mother sounds strained. I wanted to ask you something, she says, and I need you to be honest with me. Wren's stomach tightens. Okay. Have you been angry with me about the funeral, about how I handled everything? Because you've seemed distant and I keep wondering if I did something wrong. Wren closes their laptop. The question sits heavy between them, and the old instinct rises. No, of course not, you were fine. But they glance at the window, see the clear circle in the centre, and take a breath. Yeah, Wren says quietly. I have been. Not about the funeral itself, but about after. You kept saying I needed to move on, that they wouldn't want me to be sad, and I felt like you were dismissing what I was feeling, like there was a timeline I was supposed to follow and I was failing by not being okay fast enough. There's a long silence. Wren's heart pounds. They almost apologise, almost take it back, but they force themselves to wait. Finally their mother speaks, and her voice is thick. I didn't mean it that way. I was trying to help. I didn't want you to hurt the way I was hurting, so I thought, if I could just push you toward the next thing, toward moving forward, it would be easier. But I wasn't listening to what you needed. I'm sorry. Wren's throat tightens. I didn't know you were hurting too. You seemed so together. I wasn't. I'm not. I just didn't want to fall apart in front of you. They talk for another hour, and it's hard. both of them crying at points, both of them saying things that are painful to hear. But when they finally say goodnight, Wren feels something loosen in their chest. Not gone, but looser. They look at the window and see that the clear circle has grown. It's the size of a dinner plate now, a zone of warmth in the centre of the glass where no frost can form, no matter how cold the night. By mid-February, Wren has a routine. Therapy once a week. Texts with Sam and Maya and a few other friends who've proven they can handle honesty. Calls with their mother every few days. And every night, no matter how tired they are, they fill the water bowl and set it on the sill. The salt has become optional. Sometimes they add it, sometimes they don't. But the gesture remains. A promise kept. A boundary held. The grief is still there. Some days it's a dull ache, background noise that Wren can mostly ignore. Other days it's sharp and consuming, a wave that knocks them down and leaves them gasping. But on those days, Wren knows what to do now. They text someone. They call Dr. Zhao. They sit at the window and speak the truth out loud. I miss them. I'm scared. I don't know how to do this. And the words fog the glass in soft, impermanent clouds that fade when the pain eases. The white lash still appears sometimes. Usually when Wren is tired, when the effort of honesty feels like too much and they slip into autopilot, answering a concerned question with, I'm good, thanks when they're not. But it's less frequent now. Wren has learned to catch themselves, to pause before responding, to weigh the cost of the lie against the relief of the truth, and almost always the truth wins. Not because it's easier, it's not, but because the alternative is a cold that never stops spreading, a frost, that takes and takes until there's nothing left but ice. One night in late February, a particularly vicious storm rolls in. The wind screams, and the temperature plummets to the kind of cold that makes the air feel solid, that turns breath to ice before it even leaves the lungs. Wren is huddled under blankets reading for class when a knock sounds at the door. They're not expecting anyone, and for a moment they tense, remembering the snow that crawled under the door that first night, the frost that spread without permission. But when they check the peephole, it's just Maya, bundled in a parka and scarf, stomping snow off her boots. Wren opens the door. Hey, Maya says, slightly breathless. Power's out in my building. Heat's gone too. I know it's late, but can I crash here? I'll sleep on the floor, Of course, Wren says, stepping aside. Come in, I'll make tea. Maya enters, shedding layers, and looks around the small apartment. Her gaze catches on the window, on the bowl of water sitting on the sill, and she frowns slightly. That's a lot of frost. Do you have a leak or something? Wren follows her gaze. The edges of the window are thick with frost tonight. The storm is that fierce, but the centre remains clear, the circle of warmth holding steady. No, it's complicated. Maya raises an eyebrow but doesn't push. Wren makes tea, and they sit on the bed with blankets wrapped around their shoulders, talking about nothing important. Classes, professors, the terrible cafeteria food. It's easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that doesn't demand anything. But then Maya says, almost offhand, you seem different lately, in a good way, more here. Wren considers this. I've been trying to be more honest about how I'm actually doing. That's hard, Maya says. People don't really want honesty. They want you to be okay so they don't have to worry. Some people do, Wren says. The ones who matter. Maya nods slowly, staring at her mug. I've been having a rough time too, actually. My parents are getting divorced, and I keep telling everyone it's fine, that I saw it coming. But it's not fine. It's really not. Wren looks at her, sees the tightness around her eyes, the way her hands grip the mug a little too hard. That sounds really fucking hard. Maya laughs, a small surprised sound. Yeah, it is. They talk until the early hours, and when Maya finally falls asleep on the floor wrapped in spare blankets, Wren stays awake a little longer, watching the window. The frost around the edges shifts and swirls with the wind, but the clear circle holds. And for just a moment, Wren thinks they see it again, the suggestion of a face, pale and distant, watching from the storm. But this time, there's no menace in it, just acknowledgement. A nod, perhaps, or the ghost of one. Wren touches their fingers to the clear glass, feels the cold on the other side, the warmth on this side, and whispers, "Thank you." The frost patterns shiver, rearrange, and fade. By March, the storms are less frequent. The snow begins to melt in earnest. revealing the dead grass and muddy paths beneath. Wren's apartment is warmer now, not just from the heater, but from something else. The accumulated warmth of honesty, of truths spoken and received, of grief acknowledged rather than buried. The window reflects this. The frost no longer forms at all on most nights, and when it does, it's thin and temporary, melting as soon as the sun rises. The water bowl remains on the sill, but Wren has started adding things to it. Small tokens, a pebble from a walk they took with Sam, a fortune from a cookie Maya brought over, a printed photo of grandmother from years ago smiling in her kitchen. The bowl has become a shrine of sorts, a place where memory and promise meet, where the cold is kept at bay not by denial, but by the warmth of what's been shared and what's been saved. Dr. Zhao tells Wren in one session, "You've done remarkable work. Grief doesn't end, but you're learning to live alongside it. That's all anyone can do." Wren nods, and later that evening they stand at the window and look at the clear glass, now almost entirely free of frost, the circle having expanded until it covers the whole pane. The view outside is no longer a whiteout. It's the parking lot, the streetlights, the shape of other buildings, the world visible and present and real. Wren breathes on the glass one more time, watches the fog bloom and fade, and says quietly, "I'm not okay yet, but I'm trying, and that's enough." The glass stays clear. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Rain patters steady against a second-floor window, turning the streetlights to smeared halos. Nora sits cross-legged on her bed, up past midnight again, laptop balanced on her knees, headphones tangled in her lap. She's been scrolling for 20 minutes through the algorithm's offerings, lo-fi beats, white noise compilations, ASMR whispers that promise to cure insomnia, when a new stream catches her eye. The thumbnail is simple, a black horizon where ocean meets sky, barely distinguishable in the darkness, and a faint buoy bell rendered in blocky pixels. The title reads Ocean Ambience, 12 Hours or Live, in that generic sans serif font that suggests no one cared enough to brand it properly. She clicks without thinking much about it. Soft surf rolls through her speakers, the kind of sound that makes you feel like you're standing on wet sand with your eyes closed. Slow gulls cry in the distance, their calls stretched and lonely. But underneath it all, beneath the obvious layers of wave and wind, there's something else. A subtle undertone like breath shaped into syllables, like someone trying to form words through water. She tilts her head, adjusts the volume. The sound is there, definitely there, but maddeningly difficult to focus on. Every time she thinks she's about to make out what it's saying, it dissolves back into the hiss of foam on shore. In the corner of the player, a tiny blue dot pulses on a minimalist map, just coastlines sketched in grey, the ocean rendered as negative space. The dot sits far out at sea, barely moving, maybe drifting with current or wind. A simple interface element, she thinks. Nothing strange about it. The kind of thing that gives you the illusion of presence, of authenticity, makes you feel like this really is happening somewhere right now, out in the dark water, while you sit in your room with your door closed and your parents asleep down the hall. Nora exhales slowly and lets her shoulders drop. The room settles around the tide. She doesn't close the laptop, she lets it play. She's been having trouble sleeping for months now, ever since the thing that happened that she doesn't like to think about. The thing that lives in her chest like a stone she swallowed and can't cough up. The usual remedies don't work anymore. Warm milk makes her nauseous. Melatonin gives her dreams that feel like drowning. Reading just makes her aware of how fast her heart is beating, how her thoughts race in circles like fish trapped in a shrinking pool. But this ocean sound seems to work differently. It doesn't ask anything of her. It just exists, rolling and rolling, endless and impersonal. She falls asleep with the stream still playing, her hand resting on the keyboard, and dreams of walking along a beach she's never seen in waking life. The sand is the wrong colour, almost purple in the moonlight, and the water whispers in a language she almost understands. When she wakes at 3 a.m, the stream is still, going. The blue dot has moved maybe half an inch on the map and her mouth is dry as paper. Old sailor's lore resurfaces in her memory the next evening as she's brushing her teeth, staring at her own reflection, until it stops looking like a person and becomes just a shape, just features arranged in the expected configuration. She remembers reading about sirens in middle school, back when she still read for pleasure, before screens ate all her attention. The stories said they lived on rocks and sang to sailors, called them to shipwreck with voices like honey and heartbreak. But her English teacher, Mrs. Valenti, had offered a different interpretation during a unit on mythology. She said the sirens didn't drag anyone under by force. They echoed what you'd already carried too long, amplified the thoughts you kept trying to drown, sang back your own voice until you couldn't tell the difference between their song and your own thinking. In modern tellings, the kind that show up in creepypasta forums and Reddit threads at 2 a.m, sirens travel by wire and bandwidth. Networks are just new coasts, after all, new territories of depth and drowning. They learn your shape from the words you feed the dark, from search histories and unsent drafts and messages typed and deleted before anyone can see. The stories come with rules, always rules, whispered and repeated and half-believed. If the song names what you deny and you answer with a lie, the tide comes in. If you speak the true word into water and give it back, the tide recedes. Nora spits toothpaste into the sink and watches it spiral down the drain. She thinks about tides, about things coming in and going out, about the difference between keeping and releasing. She doesn't believe in sirens. She's 17 and pragmatic and has taken enough psychology classes to know about pattern recognition and confirmation bias. But she also knows that belief isn't required for obsession, that you can be drawn to something while simultaneously knowing it's probably nothing, probably just noise and coincidence and the brain's endless hunger for meaning. That night she lets the stream play again, and the night after that, and the night after that. By the end of the first week she's listening every evening. She tells herself it's just a sleep aid, just a pleasant sound, just something to fill the silence that feels too heavy in her room after dark. But she's starting to notice things. The undertone, that breath shaped into syllables sound, is starting to braid itself into phrases. Not clear phrases, not yet, but the suggestion of syntax, the rhythm of meaning. And sometimes, just sometimes, she catches words she knows too well, the exact wording of late-night searches she's made, the unsent drafts that sit in her notes app like evidence of crimes she hasn't committed. She searches, "Why do I feel like this?" And 4 minutes later, the stream seems to carry that exact phrase in its undertow, though it's impossible to be sure, impossible to prove. She types out a message she'll never send, an apology or maybe an accusation. She can't tell the difference anymore. And when she deletes it and returns to the stream, the melody quotes the phrasing back at her, softened by surf but unmistakable in its cadence. She tells herself it's apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine, she reminds herself, and it will find patterns even in pure randomness if you give it half a chance. This is just ocean sounds. This is just a live stream, probably running from someone's weatherproof camera setup on a forgotten pier, probably completely automated, probably not even being monitored by anyone at all. She turns the volume up. In the second week she starts noticing the sound in other places. When she pauses the stream to go to the bathroom, the faucet hums the same motif, the same rising and falling pitch that the ocean was just using. The kettle in the kitchen carries the melody while it boils. The radiator in her bedroom, clanking as it heats up on cold November nights, matches the rhythm exactly. Even the rain in the gutter outside her window seems to have learned the song, seems to be playing it back to her, validating her suspicion that this isn't just in her head, or if it is in her head, it's also out there, it's also real, it's also happening. She opens the stream on her phone now, not just her laptop, keeps it running in her pocket while she moves through her day. During calculus class, while Mrs. Morrison drones on about derivatives and rates of change, Nora has one earbud in, the ocean breathing against her eardrum. At lunch, sitting alone because she's been sitting alone since September, since the thing that happened that split her friend group like a rock through glass, she watches the tiny map in the corner of the player and notices something she hadn't noticed before. The blue dot is moving, not drifting, not floating with current, moving with intention, with direction. When she opens the app history and looks at screenshots she took a week ago, she can see the difference. The dot was farther out then, well beyond any continental shelf, in the part of the ocean where the water is so deep that sunlight never reaches the bottom. Now it's closer. Not close, not yet, but closer. and it leaves behind a faint wake of past positions, stored coordinates appearing as slightly lighter blue pixels, like tide lines on a nautical chart. She tells her mother she's sick on Tuesday, stays home from school, watches the dot. It moves in increments so small she has to check every hour to see the difference, but it's definitely approaching the coast, her coast. The general region where she lives anyway, though the map is too minimalist to show cities or towns, just the basic outline of land meeting water. She tests it that night, deliberately, with the sort of scientific rigour that comes from equal parts curiosity and dread. She opens a blank document and types something she would never say aloud, a confession that feels like pulling glass from a wound. I think it was my fault, and I don't know how to live with that. She reads it once, twice, feels her throat tighten, then deletes it character by character and closes the document without saving. Then she returns to the stream, puts both earbuds in, and waits. It takes 6 minutes. 6 minutes of normal ocean sounds, gulls and surf and that subtle undertone that's been there all along. And then the melody shifts, reorganises itself around new phonemes, and she hears it clearly, unmistakably. Her own words softened and dissolved into the texture of waves. Fault. Don't know how to live. Fault and I don't know. Nora tears the earbuds out and throws them across the room. Her hands are shaking. She closes the laptop, pushes it to the foot of her bed, pulls her knees to her chest and tries to remember how to breathe in a way that doesn't feel like drowning. This isn't possible. This isn't how anything works. Sound doesn't carry thought. Algorithms don't read deleted text. The ocean is just the ocean, and streams are just recordings or live feeds, and there's no mechanism by which what she types on her laptop could be transmitted to some microphone setup on a distant pier and then broadcast back to her with the specific intention of unsettling her, of making her feel seen in the worst possible way. But she knows what she heard. She knows her own words. After an hour of sitting in the dark, breathing, trying to think rationally, she opens the laptop again. The stream is still playing. She never actually closed it, just muted it. The blue dot has moved another pixel closer, and in the chat window she hadn't noticed before, hidden under the video player, there are messages, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, all timestamps showing they were posted in the last few seconds, scrolling by so fast she can barely read them. I keep hearing my own voice. How does it know what I deleted? Someone tell me how to make it stop. The dot is in my bay now. I can hear it in the pipes. 3 nights ago I told it something and now I can take it back. She closes the chat, closes the laptop, unplugs it from the charger and shoves it under her bed. She will not listen again. She will not feed this thing, whatever it is, whatever her mind has made it into. She will sleep without artificial ocean sounds. She will be fine. But when she turns off the lights and lies down and closes her eyes, she can still hear it. Not through speakers or headphones, but through the house itself, through the plumbing and the walls and the window glass. The whole structure has learned the song. The whole building is humming with it. And when she goes to the bathroom to splash water on her face, to try to shock herself back into normal perception, the water coming from the faucet is cold and clear and carries the melody in its pressure and flow, the exact rising and falling pattern that has been building in her ears for 2 weeks now. She doesn't sleep that night, or the next night. By Thursday she looks like a ghost of herself, pale and hollow-eyed, and her mother finally notices, finally asks if something is wrong, if she's feeling okay, if there's anything she needs to talk about. Nora says no. She says she's fine. She says it's just insomnia, just stress about college applications, just normal teenage exhaustion. Her mother looks at her with an expression somewhere between concern and helplessness, and offers to make an appointment with a therapist. Nora says maybe later. She goes upstairs and locks her door and opens the laptop because she can't not open it, because the sound is already in the house anyway, already in her ears and her throat and her pulse, and she might as well look at the source. The dot is close now. Not at her coast yet, but approaching, definitely approaching, tracking up the continental shelf like something following a scent. The ocean sounds have changed too. They're sharper now, more immediate, less like a recording and more like a live microphone picking up real-time audio. She can hear individual drops of water hitting rock. She can hear the specific acoustic signature of waves in a harbour, confined and echoing rather than the open expanse of deep ocean. and the undertone has stopped borrowing strangers' voices. Now it's using hers, her own voice, whisper singing private fragments in perfect cadence, pulling up memories and moments she thought she'd buried. The name she avoids saying because it hurts too much, a promise she broke without meaning to, the sentence she typed to her best friend and never sent because she was afraid of what it would make real. The water around her room begins to answer. A glass on her bedside table, half full from this morning, develops a skin of ripple that shapes itself into something like text for a second. She sees a letter, maybe two, before it collapses back into simple liquid motion. Condensation on her window sketches a single syllable in the fog before streaking away down the glass. She stares at these manifestations with a kind of exhausted acceptance, past the point of disbelief, past the point of rationalization, just watching her reality reorganize itself around this impossible thing. In the stream's tiny map, the blue dot hops the headland and begins sliding along shore toward her actual town. She can see it now, can recognize the shape of the bay where she used to go with friends before everything fell apart, the inlet where the river meets the sea, the specific curve of coastline that she's walked 100 times on summer evenings when the world felt manageable and small. The buoy bell in the stream starts striking on the downbeat, no longer random but rhythmic, deliberate. And the song says her name. Not just any name, her specific name, the one her parents gave. Her, the one that appears on her school ID and her unread emails, and it says it with her own laugh tucked inside it, the particular way she used to laugh before September, before everything changed. She sits very still and watches the dot move. It's one inlet away now, maybe 3 miles of water, close enough that if she went to the beach right now in the middle of the night, she might be able to see whatever is making that sound, whatever is carrying that signal. The melody stops its endless circling and asks in her voice, in her exact cadence and tone, "Will you tell me now?" Nora sits on the floor with her back against the bed and tries to remember the rules. The stories she read said that if the song names what you deny and you answer with a lie, the tide comes in. The tide comes in and doesn't go back out. The tide comes in and keeps coming, rises past high water marks, floods into streets and houses and mouths, drowns everything in the thing you won't say, the truth you keep swallowing. But if you speak the true word into water and give it back, if you take what you've been carrying and return it to the sea, the tide recedes, the song loses its power, the coast becomes just a coast again. She doesn't know if she believes this. She doesn't know if belief matters. But she knows she can't keep going like this. Can't keep feeding this thing her silence and her fear, can't keep letting it grow in the space between what happened and what she'll admit happened. She gets up slowly, legs shaky from lack of sleep, and goes to the kitchen. Her parents are asleep. The house is dark except for the glow of her laptop screen coming from upstairs. She finds a bowl in the cabinet, fills it halfway with water from the tap. The water hums the melody as it pours. She finds the old salt shaker from the back of the spice drawer, the one with sea salt they bought on vacation 3 years ago and barely used, and tips a pinch into the bowl. The water accepts it, dissolves it, becomes something that came from the ocean and might be returned to it. She carries the bowl carefully upstairs, laptop under her other arm, and goes to her window. Rain is still falling outside, has been falling for hours, turning the street to black mirror. She sets the bowl on the windowsill, balances the laptop beside it. The stream is still playing. The blue dot is blinking now, stationed at her bay's mouth, maybe half a mile out, close enough that the sound is crystal clear, no longer mediated by distance or static, just her voice singing back to her, all the things she's thought and not said, known and not admitted, carried and not released. The room vibrates with tide and wire. Her hands are shaking again, but this time it feels different. Feels like something about to break open rather than break down. She steadies her breathing and thinks about the word, the true word, the thing the song has been orbiting this whole time. Not a long confession, not poetry or explanation or justification, just the bare noun of it, the simple fact she's been refusing to name, the thing that sits at the centre of September like a stone in a river that all the water has to flow around. She opens her mouth and speaks it. 3 syllables, quiet but clear, said into the air above the bowl of salt water. The word for what happened. The word for what she did and didn't do, what she knew and didn't say, what she could have prevented but didn't because she was afraid or selfish or just 17 and stupid and human. The bowl's surface tightens, pulls taut like skin, then slackens, goes loose as an open mouth. The speakers hiss and crackle as if foam fell across a microphone somewhere far out in the dark water. "I'm giving it back," she says, and she means it. She means it more than she's meant almost anything. She lifts the bowl carefully and pours the water slowly out the window, tilts it so the flow is steady and deliberate, lets the salt water thread away down the gutter toward the storm drain, which leads to the creek behind the school, which leads to the river, which leads eventually, inevitably, to the sea. The undertone fractures into harmonics, splits into a dozen overlapping voices that might be hers or might be everyone who's ever listened to this stream, everyone who's ever fed their silence to this thing and received back an echo made of their own fear. The voices reknit themselves, weave back into a single tone and drop lower. The way surf sounds from farther off, the way the ocean sounds when you're walking away from it rather than toward it. On the map, the blue dot stills, stops its tracking, then ticks one pixel seaward, then another, moving back toward deep water with the same slow deliberation it used approaching. Its glow fades from bright blue to something gentler, something that could almost be mistaken for a normal interface element, a simple indicator of a simple stream. Nora sets the empty bowl on the windowsill and closes the laptop. She doesn't unsubscribe yet. She just closes it and sits in the dark and listens to the real rain, the rain that's just rain, just water falling from clouds because that's what water does when it gets too heavy to stay in the sky. She sleeps. Actually sleeps for the first time in weeks, without dreams of purple sand or whispering water, without waking every hour to check if the sound has changed. When she opens her eyes, it's dawn, grey light pushing through her curtains, and the first thing she does is check the stream. It's just ocean again. Soft surf rolling in and pulling back, slow gulls crying in the distance. The subtle undertone is gone, or maybe it was never there at all, maybe it was just the way she was listening that made it sound like words. The map shows the buoy far offshore beyond the continental shelf, a fixed position that doesn't change no matter how long she watches. She unsubscribes from the channel, closes the app, carries the emptied bowl downstairs and places it on her desk right where she can see it, a reminder that some things can be given back, some weights can be put down. Days pass, school continues. Her mother stops asking if she's okay because Nora actually looks okay now, looks like someone who's sleeping again, someone whose thoughts don't circle the same drain over and over. She goes to her classes, she does her homework, she starts responding to texts again, careful texts, tentative texts, testing whether the bridges she burned might have left some stones in the water that could be crossed. On hard nights, when the old thoughts come back with their familiar weight, she still hears the melody. It's in the plumbing when she brushes her teeth, in the shower when the water hits the tiles, in the rain that falls steady outside her window. But now when she hears it, she knows what to do. She fills her cupped hands with water, from the sink, from a glass, even from her own palm when she's nowhere near a faucet, and she names the fear into it. Not the whole story, not every detail, just the core of it, the true word at the centre. And then she pours it out, lets it go, gives it back to wherever water goes when it leaves your hands. The echo unwinds, the melody fades, the house goes ordinary again. Sometimes, late at night when she can't sleep for normal reasons, homework stress, caffeine too close to bedtime, the usual insomnia of being human and 17, she checks the channel, just to see. The blue dot idles in mid-ocean, never crossing the shelf, never approaching anyone's coast. The stream is still live, still running, the little red recording light still glowing. And in the comments when she scrolls through them, she sees strangers posting coordinates and confessions that dissolve like foam, messages that appear for a moment and then vanish, people giving their truths back to the water in the only way they know how. Nora types nothing. She doesn't add her voice to that choir of the almost drowned. She just listens to the rain without headphones now, lies in her bed in the dark and lets it say only what rain says, which is nothing and everything, which is just the sound of water returning to earth, of tides going in and coming back out, of things being carried and things being released. She falls asleep with her window cracked open, the real ocean a mile away, close enough to hear on quiet nights when the wind comes from the west. The sea keeps its distance now. It doesn't come looking for her. It doesn't sing her name or quote her fears or pulse a blue dot toward her bay. It stays where it belongs, in its designated space on maps and in the world, and she stays in hers, and the water between them is just water, salt and cold and deep, keeping nothing that she hasn't chosen to give it. The sea keeps its distance when you stop feeding it the words you meant for yourself. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. The rain came down in sheets that turned the back roads to black mirrors, each droplet catching what little light remained in the dying October evening. Mason's sneakers were soaked through, his backpack heavy with water, and somewhere between the bus stop and home he'd made the decision that would change everything. He took the shortcut through the cornfield. Everyone in town used it. The path cut 15 minutes off the walk, threading through the rows where the stalks grew tall enough to blot out the sky. Mason had avoided it for 6 years, but tonight, cold, wet, exhausted from a chemistry test he'd probably failed, he couldn't bring himself to care about old superstitions and childhood fears. The corn whispered as he entered, a sound like thousands of papery hands rubbing together. The rows stretched endlessly on either side, their leaves slick and dark with rain. Lightning flickered somewhere to the west, turning the world briefly white, and in that flash Mason saw it standing in the clearing ahead, the scarecrow. He'd forgotten it was there, or maybe he'd convinced himself it wouldn't be any more, that someone would have taken it down after all these years. But there it stood, arms spread wide on its wooden crossbeam, wearing the same rotted jacket it had worn when he was 10. Except now, in the dying light and the steady rain, something was different. The burlap sack that served as its head had been replaced. Mason stopped walking. Water ran down his face into his eyes, but he didn't blink. The new burlap was lighter, cleaner, and across its surface someone had stitched letters in thick black thread. The stitching was crude, uneven, like a child had done it or someone working in the dark. But the letters were clear enough. MK, his initials, Mason Keller. Thunder rolled across the field, deep and resonant, and in its wake Mason heard his own breathing. Too fast, too shallow. It was nothing. Had to be nothing. Kids from school playing a prank, or... The scarecrow's jacket shifted. Not much. Just a slight rotation of the shoulders, as if whatever hung inside the frame had turned to face him more directly. The burlap head didn't move, but Mason felt watched anyway. Felt the weight of attention pressing against him like a physical thing. He ran. Feet slapping through puddles, corn stalks whipping against his arms and face, backpack bouncing hard against his spine. He didn't look back until he reached the road, and when he did, the field stood dark and still, the scarecrow a distant silhouette against the storm-bruised sky. Just a prank, he told himself. Just someone messing around. But his hands shook as he walked the last half-mile home, and that night he dreamed of burlap faces and stitched letters that spelled his name over and over until the thread ran red. Mason had grown up on the stories. Every kid in town had. The farmers used to do it. Back in the old days when the fields still belonged to families instead of corporations. They'd take something that belonged to their children, something small and precious, and bury it under the freshly planted rows. A toy car, a favourite marble, a baby tooth wrapped in cloth. The idea was that the crops would remember them, that even after the children left for college or the city or wherever life took them, some part of them would remain in the soil, growing and changing with each season. The scarecrow was supposed to be the guardian of those memories. Built from scraps dressed in cast-offs, it stood watch over the buried pieces and kept them safe. That's what Mason's grandfather used to say, back when Mason still visited the farm, back when things were different. But that was just superstition. Folk magic from people who didn't know any better. Mason believed in chemistry and physics, in things that could be measured and proven. He didn't believe in fields that remembered or scarecrows that watched. Except he hadn't been back to the field since he was 10. Not since the summer when everything fell apart, when he'd spent 3 weeks at his grandparents' farm and ended up running home 2 days early, calling his mother to pick him up because he couldn't stand it anymore. The silence, the endless rows of corn, the weight of expectation that settled over him like a heavy coat. Whenever his grandfather looked at him and talked about legacy and the next generation, and someone to carry it on. Mason had left and never gone back, not even for the funeral when his grandfather died 4 years later. He'd told himself it was too far, that he had school, that his mother understood. But the truth sat heavier. He'd been afraid. Afraid of the disappointment he'd see in the old man's eyes, afraid of being pulled back into that suffocating quiet, afraid of becoming someone he didn't want to be. The field was the one place he avoided, always taking the long route, always finding an excuse to go round, and now, somehow, it knew his name. The next night brought more rain, the kind that turns the world grey and soft and makes everything smell like wet earth. Mason tried to take the long route home, walked past the field entrance with his head down and his hood up, but his feet stopped at the corner where the road curved away. The shortcut would save him 15 minutes. 15 minutes less in the rain, 15 minutes closer to his warm house and dry clothes, and it was just a field, just corn and mud and a stupid scarecrow that someone had vandalised as a joke. He found himself walking between the rows before he'd consciously decided to do it. The corn seemed taller tonight, pressing in closer, and the rain made everything slippery. Mason kept his eyes on the path, watching for roots and rocks, determined not to look at the clearing until he was past it. But the compulsion pulled at him like a hook in his chest, and when he reached the open space, he looked. The scarecrow had changed. Mason's breath caught in his throat. The rotted jacket was gone, replaced by a blue windbreaker he recognised immediately, the one he'd lost during that last summer at the farm. He'd searched everywhere for it, tearing through closets and checking every room, but it had vanished. And now here it was, draped over the scarecrow's wooden frame, faded but unmistakable. That wasn't all. Pinned to one sleeve was a shell bracelet, white and pink and threaded on faded string. Mason had made it at summer camp when he was 9, worn it every day for a month until it broke and disappeared, and dangling from the scarecrow's left wrist, tied there with twine, was a single muddy sneaker, small, child-sized, with a dinosaur patch on the side. Mason had loved those shoes, had cried when they were thrown away because he'd outgrown them. His stomach churned. This wasn't a prank, couldn't be a prank. These were things he'd lost years ago, things no one would have kept, things that should have been gone forever. But here they were, arranged on the scarecrow like offerings or accusations, each one a piece of who he used to be. Lightning split the sky, and in its white flash Mason saw what made his blood run cold. Every corn row around the clearing had turned inward. Not dramatically, not cartoonishly, but subtly, unmistakably, the stalks leaning toward the centre like spectators craning their necks to see. The angle was wrong, unnatural, as if hundreds of green bodies had pivoted to watch him. "Stop it," Mason whispered, the words torn from him before he could think. A breeze pushed through the field, carrying with it the rustle of leaves and the smell of rain-soaked earth. And the corn rustled back, "Stop it, stop it, stop it," matching the exact rhythm of his words, syllable for syllable, the sound moving through the rows like an echo that shouldn't exist. Mason ran again, legs pumping, heart hammering against his ribs. Behind him, he heard the creak of wood and the whisper of straw, and though he told himself not to look, though every instinct screamed at him to keep his eyes forward, he glanced back. The scarecrow's burlap head had turned, just a fraction, just enough to follow him as he fled. The third night, the rain became a downpour that flooded the low places and turned the field into a maze of puddles and mud. Mason tried to avoid it. He really did. He took the long route, walked an extra mile in the opposite direction, even considered calling his mother for a ride, though that would mean admitting he was afraid of something as stupid as a cornfield. But every road he took seemed to bend back. Every turn led him closer instead of farther. It was as if the town had rearranged itself, as if geography itself had shifted to funnel him toward the rows and the clearing and the thing that waited there. When he finally gave in and entered the field, the water was ankle-deep in places, puddles reflecting the scarecrow's silhouette like dark mirrors. Mason slogged through them, each step an effort, mud sucking at his shoes. He didn't want to look, didn't want to see what new horror had been added to the collection, but he had to know. The scarecrow was drowning in pieces of him, his old grey hoodie, the one with the space shuttle on the back, his childhood blanket, the soft blue one he'd carried everywhere until he was 8, now tied around its shoulders like a cape. A photo. God. A photo. Stuck to its ribs with a bent nail, the image water-stained but clear. Mason at age 8, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, standing in this exact field with his grandfather's hand on his shoulder. Mason's legs went weak. He'd never seen this photo before. Didn't know it existed. His grandfather must have taken it, must have kept it, and now it was here, nailed to a scarecrow in a field that shouldn't remember anything at all. The scarecrow moved, not dramatically, not like in movies where the monster lunges and the music swells. Just a small motion, almost imperceptible, the kind of movement you might miss if you blinked. The burlap head tilted down, angling toward him, and from somewhere inside its chest, from the hollow space between the wooden beams and the rotted straw, came a sound, a voice, wet and dragging like words pulled through mud. Mason? It knew his name. Not just knew it, spoke it, with recognition, and something that might have been longing or might have been rage. The sound wrapped around him like cold fingers, and Mason felt his bladder threaten to let go. Felt 6 years of rational thought crumbling in the face of impossible truth. Mason Keller. Behind him the corn began to move. Row by row, stalk by stalk, they turned to face him. Not bending in the wind, not swaying naturally, but pivoting like hundreds of bodies all looking at once, all fixing their attention on the boy who'd run away and never come back. The sound they made was worse than silence, a collective rustle that rose and fell like breathing, like the field itself had developed lungs. Mason wanted to run, wanted to scream, but his body refused to obey, locked in place by fear and recognition, and the terrible understanding that this was real, this was happening, this had been waiting for him, ever since he'd carved his initials into the barn wall and run away crying, because he couldn't be what his grandfather needed him to be. The scarecrow took a step forward. It shouldn't have been able to. It was nailed to a crossbeam, stuck in the ground, just wood and straw and stolen clothes. But it moved anyway, one leg dragging through the mud with a sound like tearing paper, leaving a furrow behind it. The burlap face tilted further, and though it had no eyes, Mason felt seen, truly seen, down to the marrow of his bones. "Why did you leave me?" The words came from everywhere and nowhere, from the scarecrow and the corn and the rain itself. They echoed in Mason's skull, bouncing around like wasps in a jar, and with them came a flood of memory he'd tried so hard to bury. The fight. God. The fight. Mason, at 10 years old, standing in the barn with his grandfather while the old man talked about the farm, about tradition, about how someday this would all be his if he wanted it. And Mason, overwhelmed and terrified and too young to know how to say what he really meant, had shouted that he didn't want it, didn't want any of it, that he wasn't going to waste his life stuck in the middle of nowhere growing corn until he died. His grandfather's face had crumpled. Not with anger, that would have been easier, but with hurt so profound it had made Mason's chest ache. And instead of apologizing, instead of trying to explain, Mason had run. Had called his mother, had left 2 days early, had never come back even when his grandfather got sick, even when it might have mattered. He'd told himself it was fine, that he'd been a kid, that he couldn't be blamed for not wanting to be a farmer. But underneath all the excuses lived a truth he'd never spoken aloud. He'd been terrified. Terrified of disappointing him. Terrified of being trapped. Terrified of the silence and the loneliness and the weight of being someone's whole legacy. So he'd run, and his grandfather had died, and Mason had lived with the guilt like a stone in his stomach for 6 years. The field hadn't forgotten. The scarecrow remembered, and now it wanted to hear him say it. Mason's legs finally obeyed him, but instead of running away they carried him forward. One step, then another, mud squelching under his shoes. The rain poured down, plastering his hair to his skull, running into his eyes. The scarecrow waited, arms still spread wide, burlap face tilted in an expression that might have been expectation or hunger, or something else entirely. "I was scared," Mason heard himself say. His voice cracked, barely audible over the rain. "I was 10 years old and I was so scared." The corn rustled, a sound like listening. He wanted me to be something I didn't know how to be. He looked at me like I was supposed to understand, like I was supposed to want this, and I didn't. I didn't want the farm or the responsibility or any of it. I just wanted to be a kid. The Scarecrow's head tilted further, burlap creasing where a mouth might be. And then I left, and I never came back because I was ashamed, because I thought he'd look at me and see someone who'd let him down, someone who'd rejected everything he cared about. So I just stayed away, even when he got sick, even when Mum said he was asking about me. I stayed away because I was a coward. Mason's voice broke completely. Tears mixed with rain on his face, hot and bitter. I never said goodbye. I never told him I was sorry. I never told him that I thought about him, that I missed him, that I wished I'd been braver, and now he's gone and I can't fix it and I don't know what you want from me. He was shouting now, words ripping out of him like they'd been held back too long, like a dam had finally burst. I was just a kid. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to tell him that I loved him, but I couldn't be what he needed, and I've carried that with me every single day for 6 years, and I don't know how to let it go. The field fell silent. Even the rain seemed to soften, the downpour becoming a gentle patter. Mason stood there gasping, chest heaving, everything inside him emptied out and raw. The Scarecrow moved again. Slowly, carefully, it bent forward at the waist, bringing its burlap face level with Mason's. This close, he could see the details, the uneven stitching, the way his initials curved across the fabric, the bits of straw poking through at the seams. It smelled like old cloth and rain, and something underneath that might have been memory. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Scarecrow simply stood there, bent close, as if studying him, or offering comfort, or waiting for something else. Then, with movements that seemed almost gentle, it straightened. The mismatched clothing, the windbreaker, the blanket, the bracelet, the shoes, began to slip from its frame. Not falling exactly, but releasing, as if whatever had held them there had decided to let go. They dropped into the mud with soft splashes one by one until the Scarecrow stood bare again, just wood and straw and burlap. Behind Mason, the cornrows shifted. The stalks that had turned to watch him were straightening, pivoting back to their natural positions, no longer bent in observation. The field breathed out, a long exhalation that moved through the rows like wind, and Mason felt something in his chest loosen, something that had been wound tight for years finally beginning to uncoil. He reached up and touched the burlap head. The fabric was rough under his fingers, soaked with rain, the stitched initials standing out in thick ridges. Carefully, treating it with a reverence he didn't quite understand, Mason pulled the burlap free. The head came away easily, and he held it in his hands for a moment, looking at his own initials stitched in black thread. Then he knelt and laid it gently in the mud, placing it down like he was putting something precious to rest. The Scarecrow collapsed. Not violently, not with any drama, but with a tired sort of settling, the way a body might sink into bed after a long day. The wooden crossbeam fell sideways, the straw loosened and scattered, everything that had held it together suddenly deciding it no longer needed to maintain form. Within seconds, all that remained was a pile of wet straw and splintered wood, already sinking into the waterlogged soil. The rain changed. It was still falling, but warmer now, gentle instead of punishing. The sky above was still dark, but not with the same oppressive weight. Everything felt lighter somehow, as if the field itself had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Mason stood there for a long time, looking at the place where the Scarecrow had been. The trinkets lay scattered in the mud, his old clothes, that photo, the bracelet, all the pieces of childhood he thought he'd lost. He thought about gathering them up, taking them home, but something told him to leave them. They belonged here, had always belonged here, and taking them would be like breaking a promise he'd only just managed to keep. He turned and walked toward the road. His feet found the path easily, even in the dark, and the corn whispered around him but didn't turn. By the time he reached the edge of the field, the rain had stopped completely, leaving only the drip of water from leaves and the smell of wet earth. Mason paused at the road, one foot on pavement, one still in the field. Something made him look back. The clearing was empty. No Scarecrow, no scattered belongings, no sign that anything had been there at all except trampled corn and churned mud. It looked like it always had, like it always would, just another field waiting for harvest. But as Mason watched, a single cornstalk near the centre dipped low, bending as if bowing or nodding in acknowledgement. Then it straightened again, standing tall with all the others, indistinguishable from the rest. A farewell. Or maybe a reminder not to forget again. Mason walked home slowly, his clothes soaked through, his shoes squelching with every step. When he got to his house, he stood in the driveway for a while, looking at the warm lights in the windows. His mother would ask where he'd been, would fuss about his wet clothes and probably make him hot chocolate even though he was too old for that kind of thing. He'd tell her about the field, not all of it, not the scarecrow, or the moving corn, or the voice in the rain, but the important part. He'd tell her that he'd finally gone back, that he'd finally said the things he needed to say, and that maybe, if she had pictures of Grandpa, he'd like to see them. Maybe even frame one. Put it on his desk where he could see it every day and remember that running away doesn't fix anything, that some debts can only be paid with truth. Inside, his mother was cooking something that smelled like onions and garlic. The TV murmured in the living room. Everything was warm and normal and safe. Mason peeled off his muddy shoes and left them by the door, and when his mother asked if he was okay, he surprised himself by saying yes, and meaning it. That night, he dreamed of cornfields, but for the first time in 6 years the dream wasn't a nightmare. In it, his grandfather stood at the edge of the rows, hand raised in greeting or goodbye, and when Mason waved back, the old man smiled. Then he turned and walked into the corn, and the stalks closed behind him like a door, and Mason woke with tears on his face but peace in his chest. He never took the shortcut again. Not because he was afraid, but because he didn't need to. The field had gotten what it wanted, his truth, spoken aloud, acknowledged and accepted. Whatever contract had bound them was satisfied. Whatever debt had gone unpaid was settled. But sometimes, on rainy October evenings when the light fades early and the world goes soft and grey, Mason walks to the edge of the field and stands there for a while. He doesn't go in, doesn't need to. He just stands and listens to the corn whisper in the wind, to the sound of stalks rubbing against each other like papery hands, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, he whispers back, "I remember," he says. "I promise I remember." And the field, which has seen generations come and go, which has buried the belongings of children who left and never returned, which guards memories like treasure and demands payment in truth, stands quiet and still. The weeks that followed felt different somehow, as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis and everything had to find its balance again. Mason caught himself thinking about his grandfather more often, not with the sharp stab of guilt that used to accompany those memories, but with something softer, something that felt almost like fondness. He asked his mother about the farm, about what it had been like when she was growing up, and she talked for hours, her face animated in ways he hadn't seen before. She showed him the photo albums she kept in the hall closet, thick books with cracking spines and pages that stuck together. There was his grandfather as a young man, lean and sunburned, standing beside a tractor that looked ancient even in the faded photograph. There he was with Mason's grandmother, both of them dressed for church, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. And there, scattered throughout the albums like breadcrumbs leading back through time, were pictures of the field. The corn had always been there, in every season, every year, standing tall or freshly cut or buried under winter snow. The field was the constant, the thing that didn't change even as people grew old and died, and new generations took their place. Mason traced his finger over one photograph, a wide shot taken from the roof of the barn, and realised he could see the clearing in the centre, a small empty space where the scarecrow must have stood. He loved that field, his mother said softly, looking over Mason's shoulder. More than anything, I think. More than the house. More than the equipment. He used to say it was alive in a way that other places weren't, that it remembered things. Mason's hand stilled on the page. "Did you believe him?" She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her voice had a strange quality to it, distant and thoughtful. "I don't know. Maybe. There were times when I was young, before I moved away, when I'd go out there and feel like I wasn't alone, like the field was watching me, keeping track." She laughed, but it sounded forced. Probably just a child's imagination. "What did you bury there?" Mason asked suddenly. "In the field." Your parents did it, didn't they? The tradition. His mother's face went still. She reached out and turned the page of the album, not meeting his eyes. A doll, she said finally. My favourite one. She had red hair and a blue dress, and I took her everywhere. But when I turned 12, Dad said it was time, that the field needed something to remember me by when I left for college, so we buried her between the rows during planting season. Did you want to leave? More than anything. Her voice was firm, decisive. I couldn't wait to get out of this town, away from the farm, away from all of it. But she paused, fingers resting on a photograph of herself as a teenager, standing in front of the barn with a suitcase at her feet. But I still think about it sometimes. Wonder if I should have stayed, or at least visited more. Your grandfather never said anything, but I know it hurt him when I moved away. And then when I had you, I thought, maybe you'd be different. Maybe you'd want what I didn't. Mason closed the album carefully. I'm sorry I never went back. You were a child. You didn't owe him anything. Maybe not, but I owed him honesty. I owed him the chance to know that I didn't hate him, that I wasn't rejecting him, just the life he'd built. Mason stood up, the album heavy in his hands. Can I borrow this? I want to look through it more. His mother nodded, and something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or a shared recognition of the weight they'd both been carrying. That night, Mason spread the photos across his bedroom floor and spent hours studying them, memorizing his grandfather's face, the way he stood, the rough work-worn hands that appeared in frame after frame. There was love in those pictures, and pride, and a loneliness that Mason had never noticed before but couldn't unsee now. The old man had wanted someone to carry on his work, yes, but maybe what he'd really wanted was just to be remembered, to know that the life he'd built and the land he'd tended meant something beyond his own existence. And Mason had denied him that by running away and staying gone. But the field had remembered for both of them. At school, Mason found himself distracted, his mind wandering during lectures, his homework taking twice as long as it should. His friends noticed the change but didn't comment on it. Mason had always been quiet, a little withdrawn, and they'd learned not to push. Only his friend Tyler said anything, catching him staring out the window during lunch. You okay, man? You've been weird lately. Just thinking, Mason said. About what? Mason almost brushed it off with a joke or a shrug, but something made him tell the truth. My grandfather. He died a few years ago, and I never really dealt with it. But lately I've been thinking about him a lot, remembering things. Tyler nodded slowly. That's heavy. Were you close? Not really. I mean, I was when I was little, but then we had a fight and I stopped visiting. I always meant to make it right, but I never did. Mason picked at his sandwich, not hungry. You ever do something you regret so much it feels like it's eating you from the inside? Everyone does, I think. Tyler was quiet for a moment. My dad left when I was 8, just packed up and moved to Arizona without saying goodbye, and I was so angry at him for years, you know. Hated him. But then last year he called and wanted to meet up and I said no, hung up on him, and now I wonder if that was stupid. If I should have at least heard what he had to say. Mason looked at his friend, seeing him differently. Do you think you'll call him back? Maybe, probably, I don't know. Tyler grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's complicated, right? All this family stuff. No easy answers. Yeah, Mason agreed. No easy answers. But that night, lying in bed and listening to the rain start up again, Mason thought maybe there were some answers after all. Not easy ones, not comfortable ones, but answers nonetheless. The field had taught him that some debts could be paid, some wounds could be acknowledged even if they couldn't be healed. His grandfather was gone, and nothing would change that. But the field remained, and with it the memories of a man who'd loved it enough to believe it could remember his grandson long after he couldn't. The following Saturday, Mason borrowed his mother's car and drove out to the old farm. He'd looked up the address in her papers, found that it had been sold after his grandfather's death to a corporate farming operation that now managed most of the land in the county. But the house was still there, sitting empty at the end of a gravel drive, its paint peeling and windows dark. Mason parked and sat for a while, engine ticking as it cooled, looking at the structure where his grandfather had lived for 60 years. The porch sagged slightly, and weeds grew thick around the foundation, but the bones of the place were solid. It had been a good house once, could be again, maybe, if someone cared enough to fix it up. He got out and walked around to the back where the barn still stood red and weathered against the grey sky. The door hung open, creaking in the wind, and Mason stepped inside. It smelled like old hay and motor oil and dust, and in the dim light filtering through gaps in the walls, he could see the shapes of forgotten equipment, tools hanging from hooks, a workbench scattered with screws and nails gone rusty. There, on the far wall, he found what he was looking for. The initials were carved deep into the wood, crude and childish. MK. He'd done it the last day he was here, angry and hurt and desperate to leave some mark that said he'd existed in this place. Below his initials were dozens of others, carved by hands long dead, each one a testament to a child who'd stood here and declared their presence. His grandfather's initials were there too, high up where a tall man would have carved them as a boy. J.K. Mason reached out and traced the letters with his finger, feeling the rough grain of the wood, the depth of the cuts. His grandfather would have stood here too, once upon a time carving his own mark and maybe thinking the same thoughts Mason had thought, about escape, about freedom, about the burden of inheritance. But he'd stayed, or come back. Mason didn't know his grandfather's full story, didn't know what choices had led him to take over the farm and work it for a lifetime. But he'd done it, and done it with love, and that had to count for something. "I'm sorry I didn't understand," Mason said aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the empty barn. "I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed, but I'm glad you were my grandfather. I'm glad I knew you, even if it was only for a little while." The barn made no answer, but Mason felt lighter as he walked back to the car. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, looking out at the field that stretched beyond the property line. From here he couldn't see the clearing or the place where the scarecrow had stood, but he knew it was there, waiting, patient as earth and old as memory. Before he left, Mason walked to the edge of the field and knelt down. He dug in his pocket and pulled out something he'd brought with him, a small toy car, red plastic faded to pink, one of the wheels missing. He'd found it in his room while looking through old boxes, recognised it as the one he used to play with during those summer visits, racing it across the porch boards while his grandfather watched and smiled. Mason dug a shallow hole at the base of the first row and placed the car inside. He covered it with dirt, patted it down and stood up. "Something to remember me by," he whispered, "so you don't forget I was here." The corn rustled softly, and whether it was wind or something else, Mason chose to believe it was acknowledgement. The field would keep his offering, would guard it along with all the others buried in its soil. And maybe someday, if he had children of his own, he'd bring them here and tell them the story of a boy who ran away but learned to come back, who learned that memory and love and duty weren't chains but connections, threads that bound you to the people and places that made you who you were. As Mason drove away, the farm growing smaller in his rearview mirror, he thought about all the children who'd left their marks in that field, all the toys and trinkets and precious things buried in the dark earth, kept safe by a place that refused to forget. It was strange and maybe a little frightening, but it was also beautiful in its way. This idea that the land itself could love you, could hold on to pieces of you long after you'd gone. The rain started again as he reached the main road, soft and steady, washing the world clean. Mason turned on the wipers and drove home through the grey afternoon, and for the first time in 6 years he felt like he'd left something behind on purpose instead of running away. The difference mattered. The difference meant everything. That night he framed the photo his mother had shown him, the one of himself at 8, standing in the field with his grandfather's hand on his shoulder, and put it on his desk where he'd see it every morning. In the picture, he was smiling, gap-toothed and sunburned, and his grandfather was looking down at him with an expression Mason recognised now as love, mixed with hope. Hope that this boy would understand, hope that he'd stay, hope that the connection between them would be strong enough to survive time and distance, and the inevitable growing up that turned children into strangers. That hope hadn't been fulfilled, not in the way his grandfather had wanted, but maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe it was enough that Mason remembered now, that he carried the man with him in memory and regret and hard-won understanding. Maybe that was its own kind of inheritance. The field would remember too. In its way, with its strange patience and stranger knowing, it would keep all of them, Mason and his grandfather and his mother and all the others who'd buried their treasures in its soil. The field was eternal in a way that people weren't, and that thought brought Mason an odd comfort as he lay in bed and listened to the rain whisper against his window. Somewhere out there, in the clearing between the rows, the earth held his secrets and his sorrows, held them close and safe, waiting for the day when he might need them again. And if Mason was very still, very quiet, he could almost feel the field reaching back to him across the miles, acknowledging him the way that single cornstalk had bowed. A connection, a promise, a debt paid and a peace made. The field remembered its children, and now, finally, Mason remembered too. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. The rain had been falling for 3 hours when Evan first heard the giggling. He sat with his back against the hallway wall, legs stretched out on the worn carpet runner, watching the crack of yellow light beneath his sister's door. His parents had gone to bed an hour ago, exhausted from another sleepless night of Lily's crying. They'd asked him to keep an ear out, just in case. He'd nodded, grabbed his phone and a blanket, and posted up outside the nursery like a sentry. The old farmhouse creaked and settled around him. Every sound had a familiar rhythm, the tick of pipes expanding, the groan of century-old beams adjusting to the temperature, the whisper of wind finding gaps in the windowsills. Evan had lived here his whole 12 years. He knew its voice, but this sound was new, soft and breathy, like air escaping through wet lips. A giggle, high and childish, muffled as if coming from very far away or through layers of fabric. It lasted only a second before the house swallowed it back into silence. Evan lifted his head from his phone. Probably nothing. Old houses made weird noises. His dad said so all the time, usually right after Mum complained about something scratching in the walls or thumping in the attic. Squirrels, his dad would say. Mice. Settling foundation. But then it came again. Clearer this time. Definitely a giggle. He pushed himself to his feet and pressed his ear to Lily's door. She was quiet inside, her breathing the soft, whistling rhythm of deep sleep. The giggling wasn't coming from her. Evan eased the door open. The nursery was dim, lit only by the glow of the turtle nightlight that projected slow-moving constellations across the ceiling. Lily lay on her back in the crib, one tiny fist curled near her cheek, her mouth slack. She looked peaceful, normal. Then he heard it again, beneath his feet. The sound rose from the floorboards directly under the crib, as if something small and delighted was crouched in the crawl space below, stifling laughter behind cupped hands. Lily's face twitched. Her lips curled upward into a smile that didn't reach her closed eyes, didn't carry into the rest of her features. It was a smile painted on, mechanical and wrong. She wasn't awake. She wasn't laughing, but something was laughing through her. Evan backed out of the room, heart hammering. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening. The rain drummed against the windows. The house creaked. Nothing giggled. He went back to bed but didn't sleep. The next morning, over scrambled eggs and toast, Evan tried to tell his parents what he'd heard. His mother, Susan, looked up from feeding Lily her bottle with red-rimmed eyes. His father, Tom, glanced at him over the rim of his coffee mug. Probably a raccoon, Tom said. They get under houses sometimes, make all kinds of noise. It wasn't a raccoon. It sounded like a kid laughing. Houses settle, Evan, especially old ones like this. His father's tone had that note of finality that meant the conversation was over, but his mother was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Worry, maybe, or recognition. "Did Lily wake up?" she asked quietly. "No," but she smiled, in her sleep. Susan's hand paused halfway to Lily's mouth, the bottle's nipple dripping formula onto the high chair tray. She smiled. Yeah, right when the giggling happened, like she heard it. His mother set the bottle down carefully. She looked at his father, then back at Evan. "Your grandmother used to tell a story," she said slowly, "about naming babies." Tom made a dismissive sound. "Sue? Come on." "What story?" Evan asked. His mother hesitated, glancing at his father again. Tom shook his head, but she continued anyway, her voice low. "She said you should never whisper a newborn's name before sunrise, that something beneath the house might hear it first, that it would learn the name, learn the voice, and try to—" She trailed off, looking down at Lily, who was gumming her fist contentedly. "Try to what?" Evan pressed. "It's just a superstition," his father cut in. "Old country nonsense. Your grandmother had a lot of those." But Evan was remembering. The night Lily was born, just after midnight. His parents had brought her home from the hospital around 2 a.m. He'd watched from the hallway as they carried her into the freshly painted nursery, his mother rocking her gently, whispering her name over and over like a lullaby. Lily, Lily, our sweet Lily, before sunrise. "What's supposed to happen?" Evan asked his mother. She picked up the bottle again, not meeting his eyes. "Nothing, it's just a story." But her hands were shaking. That night, Evan lay in bed with his door open, listening. The rain had returned, heavier now, turning the darkness outside into a wall of sound. He'd left his bedside lamp on, a small act of defiance against the creeping unease in his chest. Around midnight the tapping started, soft at first, irregular, like fingernails drumming on wood. Evan sat up, straining to hear over the rain. The sound was coming from somewhere below him, somewhere in the bones of the house. Tap, 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 tap. Random. Meaningless. He got out of bed and padded down the hallway to Lily's room. The door was ajar. Inside, she was awake, staring up at the ceiling with wide eyes that caught the nightlight's glow and held it like glass. The tapping continued beneath the floorboards, patient and persistent. Evan crept closer to the crib. "Lily?" he whispered. She didn't look at him. Her small chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of breathing, but her eyes didn't blink. The tapping grew louder, faster, and then it fell into a pattern, a rhythm. Ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. Evan's own heart stuttered as he realised what he was hearing. The tapping was matching Lily's heartbeat. He could see her chest moving, see the pulse in her tiny throat, and beneath his feet something was keeping time with it, learning it, memorising it. Lily's mouth opened. No sound came out, but her tongue moved, shaping syllables in silence. The tapping stopped. Evan stood frozen, barely breathing, waiting for it to resume. But the house had gone quiet except for the rain. He watched Lily for another minute, then 2. Her eyes finally closed. Her breathing deepened into sleep. He was about to leave when he saw it. Her shadow on the wall behind the crib, cast by the nightlight. It was thinner than it should be, the edges slightly blurred, as if it wasn't quite solid anymore, as if it was seeping away. Evan didn't tell his parents. He wasn't sure what he'd say, how to explain the feeling coiling in his gut like something cold and alive. Instead, he started spending more time in Lily's room during the day, watching her, looking for signs of whatever was wrong. She seemed fine. She babbled and grabbed at toys and spit up on her bib like any 6-month-old, but her shadow kept getting lighter. Not all at once. It was gradual, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. By the 3rd day, it was barely visible even in direct sunlight, and the tapping had become a nightly ritual. It started around midnight and lasted for hours, that steady ba-bump matching Lily's heartbeat with eerie precision. Evan would lie in bed listening, stomach knotted, until finally it would stop just before dawn. On the 4th night, he forced himself to investigate. He waited until the tapping started, then crept into Lily's room with his phone flashlight. She was asleep, or seemed to be. Her eyes were closed, her breathing even. But her hands were clenched into fists so tight her knuckles had gone white. Evan knelt beside the crib and pressed his ear to the floorboards. The wood was old, slightly warped, the gaps between planks wide enough to let cold air seep up from the crawl space below. He could feel it on his cheek, damp and earth-smelling. The tapping was directly beneath him. And then he heard something else, something that made his blood go cold. Breathing. Not the rhythmic in and out of sleep, but deliberate breaths. Controlled. And not just one set. 2. One slightly faster than the other, slightly shallower, as if something was learning how to breathe by listening to Lily do it first. Evan jerked back from the floor. His phone light swept across the room and caught something that made him gasp. Lily's shadow on the wall was moving. Not with her breathing or any movement she was making, but on its own, stretching downward toward the baseboards like it was being pulled, like something beneath the floor had hooked invisible fingers into it and was slowly reeling it in. "No," Evan whispered. "No, no, no." He reached into the crib and scooped Lily up. She was warm and solid in his arms, her weight reassuring. She stirred but didn't wake. He carried her quickly out of the room and down the hall to his parents' bedroom, shouldering through the door without knocking. "Something's wrong with Lily," he said loudly. His mother shot upright, instantly awake with that parent instinct. "What? What happened?" "Her shadow? It's disappearing. Something's taking it." His father groaned and rolled over. "Evan, it's 3 a.m. Look at her." Evan held Lily out. "Look at her shadow." Susan fumbled for the bedside lamp. Yellow light flooded the room, and they all looked at the wall where Lily's shadow should have been cast clearly and darkly. It was there. Faint, but there. Normal enough that Evan's father made an exasperated sound, and his mother's expression shifted from alarm to confusion to something like pity. "Honey, she's fine," Susan said gently. "You're probably just tired. You've been staying up late keeping watch. I'm not making it up. In her room, it's almost gone. Something under the floorboards is pulling it down, and there's tapping every night and breathing and—" "Evan," his father sat up now, rubbing his face. "I know you're worried about Lily. We all are. She's had a rough few weeks, but you can't let your imagination run wild. You're scaring yourself for no reason." "It's not my imagination." "Enough." Tom's voice was firm. "Give Lily to your mother and go back to bed. We'll talk about this in the morning." Evan wanted to argue, to make them understand, but he could see it was useless. They thought he was being dramatic, inventing problems because he was anxious or attention-seeking or whatever explanation made sense to adult logic. He handed Lily to his mother and left without another word. The next day, Lily wouldn't stop giggling. It started after breakfast, small bursts of laughter that seemed to come from nowhere. She'd be sitting in her bouncer, staring at nothing, and suddenly she'd giggle. A bright, delighted sound that should have been cute but somehow wasn't. It was too perfect, too practiced, like someone doing an impression of what a baby's laugh should sound like. Susan seemed thrilled. "Oh, listen to her, she's so happy today." But Evan watched from the doorway and felt sick. Each giggle was identical to the last. Same pitch, same duration, same breathy quality. And Lily's expression never changed. She didn't smile, her eyes didn't crinkle. She just stared ahead and produced these mechanical bursts of laughter, like a doll with a pull string. That night, he heard it clearly. He was back in his post outside Lily's room, determined to document whatever was happening, even if his parents wouldn't believe him. The tapping started right on schedule, and beneath it he could hear that other sound, the breathing, the mimicry, something learning. And then, rising from below the floorboards, came a voice. "Mama," whispered, soft, exactly like Lily's voice, if Lily could speak. Evan's whole body went rigid. "Mama," it said again. Then, "Bubba." That was what Lily called him, or tried to. She couldn't quite manage brother yet, so it came out as Bubba. His parents thought it was adorable. Hearing it from beneath the floor made Evan's skin crawl. Inside the nursery, Lily giggled. And a second later, the thing below giggled too, an exact echo. Evan grabbed his phone with shaking hands and started recording. The audio would prove it. They'd have to believe him then. He held the phone near the crack under the door and waited. The tapping continued, steady and rhythmic. The breathing continued, but the voice had gone silent. "Come on," Evan thought desperately. "Say it again. Say something." As if it had heard him, the voice whispered, "Bubba." And inside the room, Lily repeated it. "Bubba." She was asleep. He could hear the whistle of her breathing, see through the crack that she wasn't moving. But her voice had spoken anyway, shaped by something else, something that was using her throat as a practice instrument. The recording caught it all. Evan played it back with the volume low, listening to his own ragged breathing and then those overlapping voices, Mama, Bubba, the giggles, and knew with crushing certainty that his parents still wouldn't believe him. They'd say it was Lily talking in her sleep, that he'd edited it somehow, that he was making it up for attention. He was on his own. Over the next 2 days, Lily got worse. Her skin took on a greyish tint, like milk left too long in the sun. She barely ate. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. And her shadow was almost completely gone. Even in direct afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, it was only the faintest smudge, more like a stain than a shadow. But the voice beneath the floor was getting stronger, clearer. It was stringing words together now, building sentences. "Mama, come here. Bubba, help me. Hungry. Tired. Night-night." All things Lily would say if she could talk, all in her voice. Evan's mother took Lily to the paediatrician. They ran tests, drew blood, checked her for infections and deficiencies, and a dozen other medical explanations for her sudden listlessness. Everything came back normal. Probably just a virus working its way through her system, the doctor said. Keep her hydrated and give it a few days. But Evan knew it wasn't a virus. It was something much worse, something old and patient, something that had been growing beneath their house since the night Lily's name was first spoken, feeding on it, shaping itself in her image. On the 7th night, Evan woke to the sound of scratching. Not tapping, not breathing, scratching, frantic and hungry, like fingernails clawing at wood from underneath. He ran to Lily's room. She was floating 6 inches above the mattress. No, not floating, being pulled. Her body was rigid, arms at her sides, and beneath her the floorboards were bulging upward, splintering at the edges. Her shadow had detached completely from her body and was plastered against the boards like a dark stain, stretching and thinning as something below tried to drag it down through the gaps. Evan lunged forward and grabbed his sister. She was ice cold, her skin clammy. He yanked her away from the crib and the shadow snapped like a rubber band, recoiling partway back toward her, but not reconnecting. It hovered in the air between them, a translucent silhouette that flickered like a candle flame. The scratching intensified. The bulge in the floorboards pressed higher, and for one horrible moment Evan saw the clear impression of a small hand, fingers spread wide, pushing up from below. He ran. He carried Lily straight to his parents' room, his sister limp and freezing in his arms. This time he didn't try to explain. He just thrust her at his mother and said, "Feel her. She's cold. Something's wrong." Susan took Lily and gasped, "Tom, she's freezing. Get a blanket." They wrapped her up and rubbed her arms and feet, trying to warm her. Colour slowly returned to her cheeks, but her eyes remained closed. She was breathing, but distantly, as if most of her was somewhere else. "We need to take her to the hospital," Susan said, her voice high and tight. "I'll get the car started." Tom was already moving, grabbing his keys. "Wait," Evan said. "Wait, you have to listen to me. There's something under the house, under her room. It's been taking her shadow. I know that sounds crazy, but..." "Not now, Evan." His mother's voice cracked. "Mum, please, look at her shadow." Susan glanced down. In the lamplight, Lily's shadow was barely visible, a ghost of itself. But before Susan could react, Tom was back, telling them to hurry. They rushed Lily to the car. Evan followed, helpless, watching his parents strap her into the car seat and speed off into the rainy night. He stood in the driveway until the taillights disappeared, then turned back to the house that was breathing. He could see it now, the way the old farmhouse seemed to expand and contract slightly, as if something inside it had grown large enough to press against the walls. The windows were dark, but not empty. There was a sense of presence, of waiting. Evan walked back inside. He climbed the stairs. He went to Lily's room. The floorboards had settled back into place, but there was a new gap between 2 planks near the crib, wide enough to fit his fingers into. He knelt and pulled, and the board lifted easily, too easily, as if it had been loosened from below. Cold, wet air rushed up from the opening. It smelled like mud and old wood and something else, something organic and wrong. Evan pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut down into darkness, illuminating hard-packed earth about 4 feet below. He could see the underside of the floorboards, the support beams, the foundation stones, and footprints, small footprints in the mud, dozens of them crisscrossing the space. Child-sized but wrong. The toes were too long, the arches too shallow, the spacing irregular, like something learning to walk and not quite getting it right. The prints led deeper under the house, toward the far corner beneath the nursery. Evan knew he should wait for his parents, should call someone, should do anything except what he was about to do. But Lily's shadow was down there. Part of his sister was down there, and whatever had taken it was learning to be her, learning to replace her. He lowered himself through the opening. The crawl space was exactly tall enough for him to crouch, not stand. His phone light swept across the expanse, catching the underside of the house in harsh white relief. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Cobwebs hung in thick curtains. The mud beneath his feet was cold and slick. The footprints led him forward. He followed them, breathing through his mouth to avoid the smell. The space grew narrower as he went, the ceiling lower, until he was practically crawling. His phone battery was at 40%. He tried not to think about what would happen if it died. In the far corner, where the foundation met the original stone walls of the house's oldest section, the footprint stopped. And there it was, the changeling. It sat with its back against the stones, legs stretched out in front of it, arms resting in its lap like a child patiently waiting. It was roughly Lily's size and shape, but made of pale clay and wet wood, its surface gleaming in the phone light. It had no features except for a mouth, a wide, lipless gash that stretched from ear to ear. And plastered across its back like a wet cloth was Lily's shadow, darker and more solid than it had been upstairs, merging slowly into the creature's substance. The mouth moved. "Bubba," Lily's voice, perfect and horrible. Evan's throat closed. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. The changeling tilted its featureless head toward him. "Bubba, help me," it said. "Scared. Dark. Want Mama." It was using her words, her inflections, her voice. If Evan closed his eyes, he could almost believe it was his sister speaking. "You're not Lily," he managed. The mouth stretched wider. "Lily," it agreed. "Name. My name. Said it first. Mine. Give her shadow back." The changeling made a sound, that giggle, breathy and delighted. "Mine," it repeated, learning, almost ready, almost right. "Then go up. Be Lily. She go down. Fair." Evan's hands clenched into fists. "No, you can't have her." "Already have." The thing's voice was changing, becoming less like Lily and more like something else, something older and patient. "Shadow first, voice next, body last. When rain stops, when sun comes, trade done. She stay here, I go up, same. Why?" Evan's voice cracked. "Why her?" Name spoken wrong time. Heard it. Fed it. Grew it. Old rules. The changeling shifted, and Evan saw that its fingers were beginning to differentiate, splitting from mitten-like stumps into individual digits, learning to be human. "Always someone speaks name too early. Always someone feeds me. Always fair trade." Lily's shadow rippled across the creature's back, and Evan saw his sister's silhouette flex its tiny hand, saw the curve of her cheek and the bow of her mouth preserved in darkness. She was still in there somehow, still reachable. "What if I take it back?" Evan asked. "What if I pull her shadow away?" The mouth curved upward into something like a smile. "Can't. Connected now. She thinning. I thickening. When she thin enough, when I thick enough, shadow brings body down, brings it here, then I wear body up, walk in sun, talk to Mama, be loved, be kept. You can't love. You don't even know what that means." "Learning," the changeling said simply. "Learning everything. How to smile, how to laugh, how to cry. Watch Lily. Copy Lily. Be Lily better than Lily." And that was when Evan understood. It didn't want to hurt his sister out of malice. It wanted to replace her because it was hollow, because it was nothing, because it had grown in the dark beneath the house listening to love and warmth happening above and wanted desperately to be part of it. It was lonely. That realization hit Evan like a physical blow. This thing, this creature of mud and wood and stolen names, was just trying to climb toward light. "You can't," Evan said quietly. "Even if you take her place, even if you copy her perfectly, you'll never really be her. You'll always be afraid someone will find out. You'll always be alone inside." The changeling's mouth closed. For a moment it sat in silence, and Evan could see Lily's shadow shudder on its back. "Afraid," it said finally, and now its voice was uncertain, younger. "Don't know afraid. What is afraid?" "It's what I feel right now. It's knowing I might lose my sister. It's being terrified I'm not strong enough or smart enough to save her. It's feeling like nothing I do matters and everything I love will be taken away." The words came pouring out, things Evan had never said out loud, things he'd barely admitted to himself. "I'm afraid all the time. Afraid my parents will realize I'm not worth as much as Lily. Afraid something bad will happen and it'll be my fault. Afraid of being forgotten or useless or wrong." The changeling's head tilted. "Afraid," it repeated. "Lily feels afraid. Everyone feels afraid. Even if loved, even if kept. Especially then, because you have something to lose." Lily's shadow rippled again, more violently this time. The changeling's form flickered, becoming less solid, as if Evan's words had disrupted whatever magic held it together. "Don't understand," it said. Its voice was fragmenting, losing coherence. Love not make safe? No, Evan said. Love makes you vulnerable. It means you can be hurt. But you risk it anyway because being loved is worth being afraid. The creature made a sound. Not a giggle this time, but something like a sob. Its clay-like substance began to crack, moisture seeping from the fissures. Lily's shadow started to peel away from its back, slowly at first, then faster. Can't keep, the changeling whispered. Can't be. Too afraid. Don't want afraid. Then let her go, Evan said. Let her shadow go back to her. The creature slumped forward. Its shape was collapsing, losing definition, melting back into mud and splinters, but its mouth remained, that stretched gash still moving, still speaking in Lily's stolen voice. Tell her, it said. Tell Lily. Tried to be her. Wanted to be loved. Wanted to be kept. I'll tell her, Evan promised. The mouth curved into one last smile, sad this time, and knowing. Then the changeling dissolved completely, its substance collapsing into a puddle of mud and clay that spread across the crawlspace floor. Lily's shadow hung in the air for a moment, a dark silhouette untethered to any body. Then it moved, flowing past Evan like spilled ink, racing back through the crawlspace toward the opening above. Evan followed as fast as he could, scrambling through the narrow space, hauling himself up through the gap in the floorboards. He fell into Lily's nursery gasping, covered in mud, his phone battery down to 15%. The shadow was already gone, back to Lily, wherever she was. He replaced the loose board and stood there in the empty room, listening to the house settle around him. The rain was stopping. The sky outside the window was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. The floorboards gave a long, tired sigh, as if something that had been holding its breath for a very long time had finally let go. His phone rang. His mother. Evan? Honey, everything's fine. Lily's warming up. They're running tests, but the doctor thinks it was just a fever spike. We'll be home in a few hours. Are you okay there by yourself? Evan looked around the nursery, the crib, the nightlight still projecting its slow constellations, the floorboards solid and quiet beneath his feet. Yeah, he said. I'm okay. When his parents brought Lily home that afternoon, she was babbling and reaching for toys and spitting up on her bib like nothing had happened. Her shadow was back, solid and dark, moving perfectly with her body. She looked at Evan and smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes and crinkled her nose. Bubba, she said clearly. He picked her up and held her close, breathing in the baby smell of her, feeling her warmth and weight and realness. I got you, he whispered. I got you back. That night, it rained again. Evan lay in bed listening, waiting for the tapping to start, for the breathing, for the voice. But the house was quiet. The only sounds were natural ones. Wind, water, the settling of old beams. He was almost asleep when he heard it. Just once. So faint he might have imagined it. A single giggle from beneath the floorboards, breathy and practiced and sad. Then nothing. The rain continued through the night and into the morning, but when it finally stopped, the silence was complete. Whatever had lived beneath the house was gone, or sleeping, or waiting for the next name spoken at the wrong time. Evan got up and went to check on Lily. She was sleeping peacefully, her shadow dark and whole on the wall behind her crib. He stood there watching her, breathe, her tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm with herself, and only herself. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds. Light streamed through the nursery window, catching the dust motes and turning them gold. Lily stirred. Her eyes opened. She saw Evan and giggled, her own laugh, bright and genuine. He smiled back. Under the nursery floor, in the crawl space where mud was drying to dust, something remembered how to giggle too. But it was only an echo now, only a memory, only the ghost of a voice that had tried to be loved. When the rain came again weeks later, Evan listened. The giggle was still there, faint and far away, a reminder that names have long memories and old houses keep secrets, and something beneath the floorboards would always remember the child it had tried to become. But Lily was safe. Her shadow was her own, and Evan had learned that love required fear, that being afraid meant having something worth protecting, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was admit you were terrified. The giggle faded only when the rain stopped, and by then Evan had learned to sleep through it. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Rain threads the lanes like silver wire, turning hedges to dark walls and potholes to mirrors. Noah drives home along the coast road after a late shift, his eyes burning from the warehouse lights still printed on his retinas. He slows for standing water that stretches across both lanes, the kind that hides the depth of things. In each puddle, his headlights paint his car, the hedge, the emptiness, and a giant black dog padding right beside his reflected wheels, yellow eyes level with the glass. He looks to the tarmac. Nothing. No dog, no splash, no ripple. Only in water does it keep pace, paws touching down without disturbing the surface. Noah blinks hard, tells himself it's a quirk of angle, a trick of light on rain. The wipers beat their rhythm. He doesn't look at the puddles again until he pulls into his drive, kills the engine, and catches one last shimmer in the shallow water by the curb. The dog stops when he stops, raises its head, and breathes steam that doesn't fog the surface. Inside, he peels off his jacket and drops his keys in the bowl by the door. The house smells like damp and the pizza he forgot to throw out 3 days ago. He stands in the kitchen with the fridge open, not hungry, just looking at the light. His phone buzzes on the counter. Hospice again. 3rd time today. He watches it vibrate across the laminate until it goes still. The screen shows 2 missed calls underneath, both from this morning. He sets the phone face down and fills a glass with water from the tap, drinks it looking out at the dark garden where rain hammers the overgrown lawn into submission. He knows the story. His grandmother told it in her kitchen while kneading dough, flour on her wrists like pale gloves. Black Shuck, she'd said. The churchyard hound, the lane walker, the old coast's omen. Sometimes a death dog, sometimes a guide, depending on what you needed and what you deserved. You could tell it was Shuck when it made no sound on wet ground, when its eyes shone from places that shouldn't hold reflections, when it walked beside your shadow instead of your body. The old people had rules. If you saw it, you were meant to acknowledge it. Tip the cap, speak a name, leave salt at the threshold. Pretending not to see invited it inside, and that was when trouble started. Shuck doesn't kill, his grandmother had said, pressing her thumb into the dough. It warns. The harm comes from looking away until the warning has nowhere left to go. Noah had been 8 and didn't believe in ghosts. At 29, he still doesn't. What he saw was headlights refracting through rain, a smear of shadow from a passing car, something explainable if he cared to work it out. He leaves the glass in the sink and heads upstairs, stepping around the cardboard box of letters that sits at the base of the staircase. It's been there for 2 weeks. He tells himself he'll read them tomorrow, or the day after, when his head is clearer and his hands are steadier. The box has his name, written in his father's slanted script across the top, black marker on brown cardboard. He doesn't look at it as he passes. The rain lingers for days. It turns the coast road into a gauntlet of standing water, each pool a small lake that reflects the sky in fragments. Noah drives to work and back, to the supermarket for milk he doesn't drink, to the pier where he sits in the car and watches waves beat themselves to foam. Every time, the dog is there in the water. Pacing him along the supermarket car park, visible in a sheen of diesel rainbow near the pier, standing perfectly still in a puddle outside the post office, while he buys stamps he doesn't need. It never appears on dry ground. Only where water gathers does it manifest, huge and black, with eyes that catch the light like coins at the bottom of a well. Its paws never disturb the surface. It breathes, he can see that, the rise and fall of its ribs, but no condensation clouds the water beneath its muzzle. He starts taking different routes, longer roads, smaller lanes, anything to avoid the places where puddles collect. It doesn't matter. The rain follows, and where there's rain, there's water, and where there's water, the dog waits. At work, his manager asks if he's okay. Noah says he's fine and stacks pallets until his shoulders ache. A co-worker mentions her dog died last week and tears up over her sandwich. Noah nods and says nothing and goes back to the warehouse floor where the lights hum and there's no weather to contend with. No reflections except the sheen of polished concrete. At night, he wakes to the smell of wet dog threaded through the damp house. It's unmistakable. The thick, warm stink of rain-soaked fur, of something that's been outside too long. He gets up and checks the doors, locked, windows latched. He walks every room, turning on lights, looking under beds and behind furniture like a child afraid of the dark. Nothing. In the hallway, a line of wet paw prints appears on the floorboards, dark ovals, perfectly spaced, leading from the front door to the base of the stairs. He stands over them, heart thumping in his ears. As he watches, they vanish. Not fade, not dry slowly, just vanish, a metre from the door, as if whatever made them simply cease to exist mid-step. He mops the floor, fills a bucket with hot water and bleach and scrubs until his knees hurt and the house reeks of chemicals. The prints return the next night, closer to the stairs. He checks the locks again, the windows, the attic hatch. He puts towels along the base of the doors in case rain is seeping in somehow. It makes no difference. The night after that, the paw prints climb 3 steps and stop. He sits on the landing with his back to the wall and waits for morning, dozing in fragments, jerking awake at every creak of the house settling. The hospice calls again. He powers his phone off without listening to the voicemail. The rain drills steady on the roof, and he tells himself he'll go tomorrow. He'll call. Tomorrow he'll read the letters tomorrow. He keeps not seeing. Not the dog in the puddles, not the prints in his hallway, not the box at the base of the stairs. He goes to work, comes home, eats cereal standing at the counter, and falls asleep on the sofa with the television muttering to itself in the corner. That night, the paw prints skip the floor entirely. He wakes at 3 a.m. with the feeling that something is wrong, a pressure in his chest like a hand pressing down. He stumbles to the bedroom and turns down the duvet, dark ovals on his sheets, damp and perfectly shaped, climbing from the foot of the bed to where his ribs would be if he were lying down. He touches one. His fingers come away wet and the print beneath them stays dark. Sleep becomes shallow, lit by lightning behind his eyes that has nothing to do with the storm. When the house goes silent between showers, he hears nails click once on the bedroom floorboards and stop, like a dog taught to heel. He holds his breath. The sound doesn't repeat. He feels the mattress settle at the corner as if something heavy placed its front paws there and waited. When he raises his head, the room is empty, except for the sheets drying darker where the paw prints had been. The air smells of wet earth and something older, something that makes his hindbrain scream to run. He stops sleeping in the bed, takes the sofa instead, wrapped in a spare blanket, keeping the lights on. It doesn't help. He wakes to find the cushion beside his head damp with the outline of a muzzle, as if something had lain down and breathed against his face while he slept. In the bathroom mirror, his eyes are bloodshot, his face grey. He looks like his father did in the last photo, the one from 2 Christmases ago, before the diagnosis, before the slow unravelling. He grips the sink and doesn't let himself think about it. Driven by a mix of fear and fury, he tears through the house in the small hours, every light blazing, front door flung open to the rain. He stands on the step, shaking, fists clenched. "What do you want?" he shouts into the empty lane. The rain answers, steady and indifferent. On the step, a shallow puddle holds his reflection, and the lane behind him. In it, the dog stands at his side, head level with his elbow, breath moving in slow, even plumes that don't ruffle the water. Noah refuses to turn his head, staring only at the reflection. His heart hammers so hard he can feel it in his teeth. "You're not real," he whispers. The puddle dog's ears flick forward. In the reflected lane behind them, something shifts. For a heartbeat, a hospital corridor seems to overlay the hedge. White light, a bed rail, a hand that could be his father's resting on a thin blanket. The image is gone when a raindrop breaks the surface. Noah slams the door, stumbles back, and sits on the stairs with his head in his hands. That night, the paw prints on his bed reach his chest and stop. Cold seeps through the duvet, a weight, like a head laid gently there, heavy and patient. In the dark, he says out loud, "I can't." His voice cracks. The presence keeps still as if waiting for the rest of the sentence. He doesn't give it one. He lies there until dawn turns the window grey and the weight lifts like fog burning off. In the morning, he sits at the kitchen table and stares at nothing. His hands shake when he lifts his coffee. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. The box of letters is still at the base of the stairs, and his phone is still off, and his father is still dying in a place Noah hasn't visited in 6 weeks. He knows these things the way you know the shape of a scar, the way you know the weight of guilt without naming it. He remembers his grandmother's voice, rough and sure. Shuck wants the truth named, the duty accepted, the road walked. It's a guide, not a thief, if you let it be. He doesn't believe in ghosts, but he believes in the wet paw prints, in the smell of rain-soaked fur, in the cold weight on his chest that waits and waits and waits. He believes in his own cowardice, in the calls he hasn't returned, in the letters he hasn't read. He believes that something is trying to tell him what he already knows, and he's been closing his eyes so hard he's going blind. So he bargains with what he can't see. At the kitchen table he pours salt into a saucer the way his grandmother taught him, years ago before she died in the same hospice his father is dying in now. He sets it by the door. He retrieves the box of letters from the stairs, opens it with shaking hands and places it beside the salt. The letters are thick, written on lined paper torn from a notebook. He doesn't read them yet. He can't. Instead, he speaks to the empty hallway, his voice barely steady. "I'll go. I'll say what I keep not saying, but you walk with me, not into me. Do you understand? Walk with me." The house is silent. Then, from somewhere upstairs, he hears it. A single soft exhale, like a dog settling into sleep. The rain outside eases to a fine veil. Noah stands, pulls on his jacket and steps onto the lane. In every shallow pool the dog pads beside his reflection, huge and grave, keeping him company in the only place it can appear without crossing over. Noah watches his feet, watches the water, watches the dog moving in sync with his steps. When fear spikes and he looks away, his sleeve grows cold and damp, as if something is brushing against him, trying to cross the boundary between reflection and flesh. When he looks back into the water and acknowledges the hound, "I see you," he says quietly. The cold recedes. Together, man and reflection dog pass dark hedges and sleeping windows, through the village that knows his name and his grandmother's name and his father's name, past the church where all three of them were christened, turning their faces toward the glow beyond the crossroads where the hospice sits like a ship run aground. The walk takes 20 minutes. It feels like hours. His legs are heavy. His chest is tight. The dog never falters, never disappears, even when the puddles thin to mere films of water on the tarmac. It adjusts, crouches lower, keeps pace. At the hospice gate, Noah stops. The path ahead is dry, swept clean by staff this morning. No puddles, no water to hold the dog's reflection. He looks back at the lane, where the hound waits in a shallow pool near the curb, watching him with those yellow eyes. "I don't know if I can do this," Noah says. The dog doesn't move. He hesitates, throat tight. Then he cups his hands, steps back to the curb, and catches the drip from the eave until a small pool forms in his palms. He glances down. In the water, caught by his own skin, Shuck stands tall and patient, eyes steady, head lowered as if in a nod. Noah's hands shake, spilling water down his wrists. He nods back once and turns toward the entrance. Inside, the air is warm and smells of disinfectant and something floral he can't name. His shoes squeak on the linoleum. A nurse he doesn't recognize glances up from her station, smiles gently, and points him down the corridor. He knows the way. He's been here before, months ago, before he stopped coming. Room 14. He stands outside the door for a full minute, hand on the frame, trying to breathe. Through the small window he sees the bed, the shape of his father under a thin blanket, the machines that beep and hum and measure the slow retreat of a life. He goes inside. His father sleeps, breath thin, each exhale a tide going out farther, leaving less behind. The man in the bed barely resembles the one Noah remembers, barrel-chested, loud-voiced, always working on something in the garage with grease under his nails. This man is small, hollowed out, his skin papery and bruised where the IV tugs. Noah sits in the chair beside the bed, the same chair his mother sat in years ago when it was her in the bed, the same chair he swore he'd never sit in again because sitting meant staying, and staying meant watching someone disappear. He pulls the letters from his pocket. They're damp from the walk, the ink slightly smeared. He unfolds the first one and starts to read. His father's handwriting is worse than he remembers, looping and uncertain, but the words are clear. Stories about the house, about fixing the roof last summer, about the neighbour's cat that keeps stealing food from the porch. An apology for the things said and unsaid, for the years they spent circling each other like wary animals, for the distance that grew until it felt permanent. A recipe for the stew his grandmother used to make, written in her slanted hand on a scrap of paper tucked into the envelope. Noah's voice falters. He keeps reading. In the window's rain-blurred reflection, the dog sits behind his chair like a shadow made honest, head on paws, eyes soft. Noah doesn't turn to look. He knows it's there the way you know someone is standing behind you in a dark room. It's not frightening anymore. It's just there, keeping watch. He reads all the letters. When he's done, he folds them carefully and sets them on the bedside table. He takes his father's hand, which is cool and dry and feels like paper in his palm. "I'm sorry," Noah says. His voice breaks. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I'm sorry I was scared. I'm here now." The machines beep their steady rhythm. His father doesn't wake. Noah sits and holds the hand and says the sentences he's been saving for a dry day that never came, for a moment when he felt ready, which he realizes now he never would have. He talks about work, about the house, about the things he's been fixing and the things he's been avoiding. He talks until his throat is raw and the sky outside turns from grey to black. His father's breath stops just after midnight. Not with a rattle or a gasp, just a quiet exhale that doesn't come back in. The room doesn't grow colder. It grows emptier and somehow lighter, as if something that was pressing down has finally lifted. The machine's alarm. A nurse comes in, checks the pulse, marks the time, and puts a hand on Noah's shoulder. He nods. He stays in the chair, holding the hand that's already starting to cool, until the nurse tells him gently that he should go home, get some rest, come back in the morning for the paperwork. He walks home in the thinning storm. The rain has gentled to a mist that beads on his jacket and hair. The puddles show only one figure now. At his door, the saucer of salt is dry and smooth, untouched, no paw marks disturbed around it. He lifts the duvet with a braced breath. Clean sheets, no damp, no prints. He sleeps hard, dreamless, until a single soft huff at dawn wakes him long enough to register a warmth at his feet, the weight of a presence departing. He opens his eyes to an empty room. The air smells clean, like rain-washed stone. Days pass. The funeral is small. He reads from the letters and doesn't cry until later, alone in the house, when he finds the recipe card tucked into his wallet and remembers the taste of his grandmother's stew, the sound of her laugh. He starts taking the long way on purpose when it rains, watching the lane pools for company. Sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes faintly, a second set of steps appears in the water. Not always a dog. Once, just the blurred suggestion of a hand walking beside his reflection, as if someone he loved were finally keeping pace. He clears out the house slowly, packs his father's clothes, the tools in the garage, the books that smell like dust and old paper. He keeps the letters, he keeps the recipe. He plants flowers in the garden, something his mother used to do, and they grow, despite his inexperience, bright against the grey of the coast. The rain comes and goes as it always has, and he learns to watch for it without fear, to see the beauty in the way it turns the world to mirrors. On the first dry night in weeks, he finds a single clean paw print on the threshold, already evaporating in the warm air, and understands with a clarity that doesn't need words. It was never trying to get in. It was waiting for him to step out. He stands in the doorway, looking at the empty lane, the hedge dark against the stars, the world wet and gleaming. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and falls silent. Noah smiles, small and sad and real, and closes the door. On the first dry night in weeks, he finds a single clean paw print on the threshold, already evaporating in the warm air, and understands with a clarity that doesn't need words. It was never trying to get in. It was waiting for him to step out. He stands in the doorway, looking at the empty lane, the hedge dark against the stars, the world wet and gleaming. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks once and falls silent. Noah smiles, small and sad and real, and closes the door. The weeks that follow are strange in their ordinariness. He goes to work, stacks pallets, comes home to the empty house that no longer feels quite so empty. He learns to cook the stew from his grandmother's recipe, burns it twice before getting it right, and eats it at the kitchen table while rain patters against the window. The taste brings her back for a moment, her hands dusted with flour, her voice rough with affection, and he lets himself sit with that memory instead of pushing it away. He saves the leftovers in containers his father bought years ago, plastic tubs with mismatched lids that never quite fit right, and finds comfort in the imperfection. At the solicitor's office, he signs papers and listens to explanations about the house, the small amount in savings, the life insurance policy his father never mentioned. Everything comes to him. It's not much, but it's something. Enough to breathe, maybe. Enough to stop working doubles and start sleeping through the night. The solicitor is kind, efficient, and when she shakes his hand and says she's sorry for his loss, he believes her. Outside, the sky threatens rain but holds off, clouds roiling overhead like something restless. He starts noticing things he'd stopped seeing. The way the coast looks in the morning, all silver light and crying gulls. The old woman at the post office who always asks after his father and tears up when he tells her. The co-worker who brings him coffee without asking, sets it on his workstation with a nod that says everything and nothing. Small kindnesses, small threads connecting him to the world he'd been sleepwalking through. He tries to return them, holds doors, smiles at strangers, says thank you and means it. The rain returns, as it always does on the coast, but now when he drives the lanes he finds himself looking for the puddles instead of avoiding them. Most of the time there's nothing, just water reflecting sky and hedgerow and his own car passing by. But sometimes, not often, but enough, he catches a flicker of movement in the corner of his vision, a shape that might be a dog or might be shadow, and he feels something settle in his chest, not fear, something closer to recognition. He doesn't stop the car, doesn't need to, just keeps driving, keeps moving forward, and lets the reflection be what it is. One evening he finds himself at the churchyard, the old one on the hill where 3 generations of his family are buried. He hasn't been since his mother's funeral, since he was 16 and angry at everything. The gate creaks when he pushes it open. Moss grows thick on the stones, and the older graves lean like bad teeth, their inscriptions worn to suggestions. He finds his grandmother's grave near the back, then his mother's beside it. The stone is simple, her name, her dates, the words, beloved wife and mother, that his father chose and Noah had thought too plain at the time. He crouches down and pulls weeds from the base, clearing away the overgrowth until the letters show clean. I'm sorry I didn't visit, he says to the stone, to the ground, to whatever might be listening. I'm trying to be better. The rain starts while he's kneeling there. A soft drizzle that darkens the stones and beads on the petals of the flowers someone else has left. His father, probably, before he got too sick to drive. Noah stays until he's soaked through, until his knees ache and his fingers are numb. When he finally stands, he sees the puddle at his feet, shallow and dark, and in it the dog sits at attention, watching him with those yellow eyes. Not menacing, just present. A witness. Thank you, Noah says, and means it for everything. The warning, the companionship, the push toward the door he'd been too frightened to open. The dog's tail moves once, a slow sweep through the reflection that doesn't disturb the water. Then it's gone, and there's only rain. He visits the churchyard twice more in the following weeks, brings flowers, pulls weeds, sits on the bench by the wall and watches the light change over the valley. The church warden finds him there once, an elderly man with kind eyes who introduces himself as Peter and says he knew Noah's grandmother, used to see her at the Sunday services. They talk for an hour about nothing important, the weather, the state of the coast road, the way the village has changed and stayed the same. When Peter asks if Noah might consider coming back to church, Noah says maybe, and surprises himself by meaning it. Not for faith exactly, but for the connection, for the feeling of belonging to something older than his own small life. He starts clearing out the garage, something he's been avoiding because it was his father's space, full of tools and half-finished projects and the smell of motor oil. He finds things he didn't know existed. A box of photos from before he was born, his parents young and laughing on a beach somewhere. A journal his father kept for a few months after his mother died, full of grief and confusion and love. A child's drawing, his own, crude and bright, taped to the inside of a toolbox lid. Each discovery is a small excavation. He sits on the concrete floor surrounded by the debris of a life and lets himself cry, really cry, for the first time since his father died. When he's done, his face is swollen and his chest aches, but something has shifted. Something has been let out that needed air. He keeps some things, donates others, throws away what's too broken to save. In the back corner he finds an old dog bed, dusty and flattened, from the terrier they had when he was 7. Patch. He'd loved that dog with the fierce, uncomplicated love of a child, and when it died he'd sobbed for days. His father had buried it in the garden, marked the spot with a smooth stone. Noah goes outside and finds the stone still there, half hidden by grass, and crouches beside it. "I remember you," he whispers, and wonders if all the love we give to things that die goes somewhere, becomes something. Wonders if Shuck is made of that, of all the unfinished grief and love and duty that haunts the lanes, looking for a way to be acknowledged. At work, his manager pulls him aside and asks if he'd be interested in a supervisor position. More responsibility, better pay, regular hours. Noah's first instinct is to say no, to keep his head down and stay invisible, but he thinks of the letters, his father's apology for not trying harder, and hears himself say yes. The manager claps him on the shoulder, says she's glad, says she's seen him stepping up lately. He doesn't feel like he's stepping up. He feels like he's just finally standing. The new position means learning things he's avoided, managing schedules, handling conflicts, speaking up in meetings. It's uncomfortable. He's bad at it at first, stumbles over his words, second-guesses every decision, but he keeps trying, and slowly it gets easier. The co-workers who used to be just faces become people. Marcus, who has 3 kids and coaches football on weekends. Sonia, who's studying for her degree at night and drinks terrifying amounts of coffee. James, quiet and steady, who lost his brother last year and understands without Noah having to explain why some days are harder than others. They become something like friends. Not the deep friendships of childhood, but the good, solid connections of people who see each other clearly. One Saturday he drives to the animal shelter 2 towns over. He doesn't know why exactly, just that the house feels too quiet, and he thinks of the warmth at his feet that morning after his father died, and wonders. The shelter is loud and smells of disinfectant and animals. A volunteer shows him around, introduces him to dogs of every size and temperament. He's not looking for anything specific. Then he sees her in the last kennel. A black mutt, medium-sized, with one ear that flops and eyes that are brown, not yellow, but steady. The sign says she's been there for 4 months. Not a puppy, not particularly pretty, overlooked. She doesn't bark when he approaches, just watches him with what looks like patience. "Can I meet her?" he asks. They take her to a visiting room and she sits at his feet, calm and quiet, while he kneels and lets her sniff his hands. She's warm and real, and nothing like the thing in the puddles, but when she leans against his leg, some of the same feeling settles in his chest. Companionship, witness, the sense that something has been waiting and can finally rest. "I'll take her," he says. The volunteer looks delighted. "What will you name her?" He thinks of his grandmother, of the stories told in flour-dusted kitchens, of the old coast and its old ways. "Mercy," he says. "Her name's Mercy." Mercy settles into the house as if she's always been there. She's quiet, well-behaved, content to lie by his feet while he cooks or watches television. She doesn't chase the cat that belongs to the neighbour, doesn't bark at the postman, doesn't chew the furniture. At night she sleeps in the dog bed he bought new, though sometimes in the early morning he wakes to find her at the foot of his bed, chin on paws, watching him with patient eyes. He doesn't mind. The house needs the life in it. He starts walking her in the evenings, long loops through the village and down to the beach when the tide is out. She's good on the lead, doesn't pull, seems content to match his pace. Other dog walkers nod at him now, say hello, comment on the weather. He learns their names, their dogs' names, becomes part of the rhythm of the place he's lived in all his life but never quite inhabited. When it rains, Mercy doesn't mind. She plods through puddles with her head down, ears pinned back against the wet, and he watches their reflections, man and dog, solid and real, walking together through water that holds nothing but themselves. Sometimes, on the longer walks that take them past the hospice, past the churchyard, past the lanes he drove in terror just months ago, he thinks he sees something at the edge of his vision. A larger shadow keeping pace in the deeper puddles, yellow eyes flickering in and out of sight. He never turns to look directly, doesn't need to, just keeps walking, keeps moving forward, and trusts that whatever is there is no longer a warning but a confirmation. You did the thing. You walked the road. You're still walking it. The first anniversary of his father's death comes on a day of driving rain. He takes the morning off work and drives to the cemetery with Mercy in the passenger seat, a bunch of cheap flowers from the supermarket on the dashboard. At the grave, which is still raw and grassless, he sets the flowers down and stands with his hands in his pockets. Mercy sits beside him. her shoulder warm against his leg. "I'm doing okay," he tells the stone, the ground, the memory. "I'm trying. I think you'd be proud, maybe, or at least less worried." The rain comes down harder. He doesn't move, just stands there until he's soaked through, and Mercy is shivering and his fingers are numb. Then he crouches down, touches the stone, and says, "I love you. I should have said it more." On the walk back to the car, every puddle they pass holds two reflections. Noah and Mercy, solid and real. Nothing else. The lanes are empty of everything except rain and the life still being lived. At the car, he dries Mercy off with an old towel and she licks his hand, her tail wagging slow and steady. He drives home through the storm, and when he pulls into his drive, the puddle by the curb reflects only his car, only the hedge, only the world as it is. Inside, he makes tea and feeds Mercy and sits at the kitchen table, with the windows steamed and the rain drumming overhead. The house smells like wet dog and the stew simmering on the stove. On the counter, his phone buzzes. A text from Sonia asking if he wants to join a few of them at the pub tomorrow. He types back yes, and means it. Another text from the church warden, Peter, saying there's a volunteer day next week if he's interested in helping clear the old gravestones. He types yes to that too. Small threads, small connections, the work of staying in the world instead of haunting it. That night he sleeps with Mercy curled at the foot of the bed, her breathing steady and deep. He dreams of walking on the beach at low tide, the sand firm beneath his feet, the horizon wide and clean. In the dream, someone walks beside him, keeping pace. He doesn't turn to look, doesn't need to. Just keeps walking toward the light on the water and knows that whatever comes next, he won't be walking alone. When he wakes, the rain has stopped. The sky outside is pale and clean, washed clear. Mercy stretches and yawns, her tail thumping against the duvet. Noah gets up, lets her out into the garden, and stands at the door watching her sniff around the overgrown grass. The air smells of wet earth and growing things. On the threshold there's nothing. No prints, no signs, no omens, just the stone worn smooth by years of coming and going, by all the people who have lived here and left and been remembered. He steps out barefoot onto the cold stone, feeling it solid beneath him, and looks at the lane beyond his garden wall. Empty, quiet, ordinary, perfect. He calls Mercy back inside, makes breakfast, feeds her before himself. The morning stretches ahead, full of small tasks and ordinary hours. He'll go to work, he'll come home, he'll walk the dog and make dinner and text his friends and maybe, eventually, find someone to love who isn't a ghost. He'll keep reading the letters on the hard days, keep making the stew, keep visiting the graves. He'll live the life he's been given, in the house that now belongs to him, in the village that knows his name. And when it rains, because it always rains on this coast, he'll watch the puddles with gratitude instead of fear, knowing that some warnings are really invitations, and some hauntings are just love with nowhere else to go. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy.